Council, please come to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mandy, could you please call the roll?
Dion.
Here.
Renewal. Here. Anstra.
Here.
Hopkins.
Here.
Spore. Here. Eval is absent, but will be attending.
Yeah, he's coming. He'll be here. He's a little bit late. So again, this meeting is virtual. So if you're attending via the phone, you will be able to provide verbal comments during the dedicated public forums and public hearings. I would ask that you please keep your microphones or telephones on mute until you, at which time you want to speak. And if you're viewing the meeting presentation online, there's a chance you could experience a delay. If this occurs, the full meeting presentation can also be viewed at the City of Pella website. I also announce after our meeting, we will have a policy and planning meeting to discuss 3 items: Central Business District parking. During the Oostport Alley project, we're going to discuss requests from Bob Zouster regarding the alleyway north of the 700 block of Washington Street, and to discuss a proposed amendment to the city's purchasing policy. Just to note that agenda item B5 L2, one of the closed sessions, has been pulled from the agenda. So do I have a motion for approval of the tentative agenda as amended?
So moved.
Support.
DeYoung, Branderhorst, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Dion.
Yes.
Renewal.
Yes.
Anstra.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Motion passed. I would like to appoint Jeff Ballard to fill a vacancy on the Airport Committee as a commercial rated pilot with instructor ratings for both single and multiple engine airplanes. Jeff has experience giving flight lessons and conducting contract flying for 2 of the large companies in Pella. Jeff is the Vice President of Information Technology at Precision Inc. If approved, Jeff's 6-year term would expire on January 1, 2027. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Answer, Spore. Any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Anstra.
Yes.
Spore. Dion.
Yes.
Renewal.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Motion passed. Also would like to announce a closed session pursuant to Iowa Code Chapter 21.5, Paragraph 1C, to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in that litigation. Pause for a moment while Bruce takes a seat.
Sorry, folks.
No problem. We'll let you catch your breath. Okay, at this time, we have time for a public forum, so if there's anyone that wishes to address council regarding any agenda items, I need you to come forward to the mic, state your name and address, and ask that you would please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I'm going to read so I don't ramble. You'll all appreciate it. My name is Julie Mueller. I live at 100 East 2nd Street, and I'm a member of the P&Z Commission. I was out of state and unable to attend council 2 weeks ago, but I was able to call in and listen. Many of the comments were about how much the Pella Market development is needed and wanted, and how good it will be for the community, and I completely agree. So I wanted to come and explain my vote. I voted along with a great majority of the commission, 7-2, to pass the PUD, but removing Section 3A and requiring the developer to comply with established design review standards in the Pella City Code 165.16, 17, and 18, requiring review and issuance of a design permit by the CDC. These are the very same code standards and reviews and issuance requirements that every international, national, regional, local, company large business, small business, and every mom and pop business has had to adhere to for decades. Over the many years, hundreds of people have volunteered thousands of hours to Planning and Zoning Commission and the Community Development Committee, or CDC. Along with the many city staff and city council members over time, you can look around this lovely town and see the results and be proud of those results and be thankful for all the people who contributed to it. They have taken an above-average small town and over the years have transformed it into, according to some articles, one of the top 25 small towns in the United States. I'm not saying this project is bad. I'm saying this project is really, really good. I think it looks great, but how can you justify making every other business who has ever come to town comply with these codes and standards, and every business that was already here having to pay out of their own pockets to make the changes necessary to comply with these codes and standards and not the Pella market? Just because it sits on this corner? The business right next door, right across the street, and all around them have had to comply with the codes and standards. I'm sure every business that has to come to town has their own design standards. You don't see huge golden arches above McDonald's and Pella, and you don't see Discount City sign in front of Walmart. But I'm not saying that Pella shouldn't move forward. I think we should be more progressive in many things. The city administration, I feel, needs to be more proactive, not just bypassing established code, but rather connecting groups like the Pella Market with the CDC much earlier in the process so they can work together and learn from each other. The Pella Market Group put a lot of research and effort into their project, and they can share this information with CDC. The CDC is well aware of how much the community wants and needs this project, and I would hope they would work in cooperation and good faith with the Pella Market and hopefully move forward by learning and incorporating the modern Dutch architecture and their standards. But I think simply by bypassing codes and procedures that have been successfully in place for decades is a dangerous precedent. What happens if years down the road this business turns hands and the new owners want to make changes to their building? Painting it hot pink, putting a huge billboard sign in front or a loud neon sign in the front window, are they still exempt? They are still in the same location. What if a new business comes to town and doesn't want to comply and doesn't want to go into the effort and the depth that the Pella Market went into and are going to sue? You know, these are all things that you need to consider when you change precedent. And I ask you to please consider and thankfully consider the Planning and Zoning's amendment, option number 2, when you go to vote on this. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie.
My name is Lane Corver, and I live at 712 Monroe. And I just want to say, I don't understand all the things that you people have to deal with, but I love how South Main is looking. We're going to move there, and it's because it has the forward-looking architecture that it has. And my children are thrilled that we're moving there. They look at those plans and say, wow, this is happening in Pella, Iowa. So I don't know what the things you have to go through to make some of these changes, but I think of Pella as being a community that was started by very innovative people who came here with their ideas and did all these things, and I think would have a great look to our city, but I would like to see more of the modern look to it also. A couple years ago, I'm not used to doing this in front of you. A couple years ago, I'm a friend of Carrie Andrigas, and she was helping house a group of students from Amsterdam. They were coming over here for a couple weeks, and they were, it was during tulip time. And I remember talking to one of them and said, well, what do you think? What do you think of Pella? And she was a high school student. And she said to me, she goes, Holland doesn't look like this. We're much more modern. And I love the look of Pella. It's beautiful, but I hope that we can mix the modern thing that is Holland now with what we have here. And if it all looks the same, then it just all looks the same. So I hope that maybe some changes will come that bring in some of the more modern, beautiful architecture. And I've seen the plans for that new market. And I've heard the story of how it's very Dutch. It's from Holland. And I don't know if a lot of people have heard that, but I'm hoping that maybe it will be shared more and that we will have a variation in what we have in our look in our community. So I want to be supportive of the market as it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Lane.
My name is Jim Mueller. I live at 1008 East 2nd Street. And I spoke to the P&Z at their meeting as well when they considered the PUD. I'd like to speak to the PUD for the Pella market. First, I'd like to say thank you to the council for not waiving the second and third reading of this ordinance at your last council meeting. It allows for others that were not able to attend that first meeting to have a voice so that we can get up and speak to that. So thank you so much for not waiving the second and third. As most of you know, I have a long history of working for development in the community of Pella. I was heavily involved at the start of this redevelopment project. Let me say without question that I support this project and feel that it would be a great addition to the community of Pella. However, I do have a concern that the parking issue, but feel that the written agreement that is now in place with other parking areas mitigates that concern somewhat. I would only suggest that you also allow others that have the requirement for parking utilize the same opportunity that we've allowed for the Pella market to meet their parking requirements as well. The specific issue that I would like to speak to you tonight is making the development exempt from the CDC review. The requirements are in place or have been in place for decades, and most other businesses in this community have been subject to this review. That's not to say that you can't include the modern architecture in that requirement. It's a CDC requirement that they meet that, and if they approve that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with including a modern element to that. But right now, exempting them would be in difference to what is currently required for all the other businesses. Just to name a few of those businesses that have complied with this requirement are Walmart, Casey's, Culver's, McDonald's, Burger King, and practically every other local business that you can imagine. I would suggest that it will be very difficult to hold others to this code if you exempt this particular business. And again, what happens years from now if this business should happen to fail and another opens in its place? Would you make this same accommodation for them, or is this strictly being made for the Pella market? Again, if we're going to include the modern architecture, let's put it as part of the allowed pieces within CDC and subject this development, just like every other development, to the CDC review. My request is to please honor the efforts of the community and business leaders over the last 30 to 40 years or longer, and continue to require this and other developments to meet the design requirements that everybody else does. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Hi, I'm Karen Van Hemert, and I live at 2313 Drenthelon. I am a member of the CDC committee. I've been a member for about a year on the committee, and we have other members who have been on it for 16, 17 years. When I came on to CDC, that was one of my things that I would like to work on, is doing some of the more modern architecture, changing our design review manual to include some of that, because I know when you go to Rotterdam, you see some pretty modern buildings. And I just think it would be neat to have in Pella. But I have to agree with other comments. Right now, our design review manual does not include a lot of that modern. Not to say that in the future, we won't be making some changes and adding them, but I feel like if we bypass CDC, again, what are we saying to all the other businesses that you can just bypass CDC, and that isn't going to be good for Pella. So I guess I just want to say I am for the market, but I do feel that we need to abide by our design manual as it stands today.
Thanks, Karen. Okay,
Actually, it's on another issue, so I get 2 bites at the apple, right?
yes, sir.
Hi, Jim Mueller, 1008 East 2nd Street, still live at the same address. I'm also the CFO for Brewmark Properties, and I would like to voice my support and our support for item E1, the outdoor service privileges for the liquor license for Dutch 200 Bowl and Grill. We have an agreement with them to utilize the lot next to the bowling alley for additional parking. I know there's one of the requirements out there about having hard surface parking. I would just like to bring to everybody's attention other permanent establishments that have non-hard surface parking. That would be Central College, Pella Motors, all kinds of tulip time parking, and also the Lightens Auto that's out on the south side as well too. So it's not without precedent that we would allow parking on hard surfaced parking lots or parking areas, and this would be for a single night and periodically potentially throughout the summer, but just on a one-night basis. So again, just want to voice our support for that, and we do have an arrangement for that. There would be no alcohol served on anything other than on the regular property. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim. Last chance, anyone else, or else we're moving on? All right, moving on, can I get a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So
Brandon Horst DeYoung, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Horst.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Danstruck.
Yes.
Skibout.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Ford.
Okay, moving on to public hearings. Item 1A, public hearing regarding an application to conditionally rezone 9.66 acres of land along 218th Place from A1 agricultural and CC community commercial to M1 limited light industrial. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to refer the council's attention to the big board. And for those following at home, I'm on slide number 3. Tonight's rezoning application comes to us from Mr. Bruce Skibout, and specifically for a parcel that's just shy of 10 acres along 218th Place. And to highlight the area that we're talking about this evening, Washington Street is located right here. Walmart subdivision is located right in this area. It's this yellow highlighted area that currently abuts 218th Place is the rezoning request. And as far as the current zoning for the parcel, it's very important to understand that it actually has a split zoning on here for this parcel. Right about here, the southern half of the parcel, if you were to go with Walmart subdivision, it seems right in this general area, is CC, which means community commercial. The northern portion of the parcel is A1 ag on it as well. So that's important to keep in mind as we talk about the rezoning request this evening. And specifically, I'd also like to emphasize to the council what we're talking about this evening is a conditional rezoning request. The base zoning district for this is M1 limited light industrial, but we do have some qualifications in the rezoning request this evening that was meant to address potential land use compatibility issues with it as well. We'll be explaining those throughout the presentation. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as far as the proposed rezoning, please keep in mind the proposed rezoning is M1 limited light industrial. We do have a description of this up here on the big board, what M1 is on slide number 4. But in looking at this area, as you can see right here, it's this orange highlighted area again. And if you look at the orange highlighted area, everything you see up here on slide number 4 that's in orange is M1, or limited light industrial. The green highlighted area is CC, or community commercial. So that's very important to keep in mind. And when we look at it, always look at the rezoning request, we look at it from a spot zoning standpoint. And what we have here is we have M1 that's in very close proximity to the property as well. So that's very important to keep in mind as we reconsider this rezoning request this evening. Now, from a land use compatibility standpoint, it's very important to note that the M1 and CC districts indicate that they are fairly compatible under the city's comprehensive plan. Ag property at M1 is rated about a 3, which means land use compatibility issues could exist. And so when we talk about a conditional rezoning request this evening that limits the usage of the property along with has design standards for buildings on it, that's what we're trying to get after, is we're trying to achieve land use compatibility with the rezoning request. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as far as the conditional uses that we're talking about this evening, we'll be going over there, and I think we do have a highlight of those, but it's very important to note that the conditional aspect of this rezoning request on slide number 5 is when you look at these items, generally speaking, and when we talk about the list of permitted items that would take place in M1 or the limited light industrial, we've removed the uses that you would not normally associate with an industrial district up here on there. Some of the things that could take place on the property under M1 are cocktail lounges. That's a bar. On there it's defined as a cocktail lounge under city code. Convenience, food sales, gas station, and a few of the other areas that we have, tattoo parlors, adult entertainment, have been removed along with recycling as well. So what we're trying to do is get down to a true M1 use on this as well. In addition, it is important to note that the developer has agreed to type A screening requirements as well for the project. And one of the big items that we have here is their buildings would still be under somewhat of a design review process under M1, the M1 district, and we do have a description of this as well. In addition, Mr. Skibout has submitted a color elevation for the building number 1 that he has currently plans for, and that would be an office building for the property as well. It's a brick building that's being proposed and showing up on slide number 5. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as far as the timing of the construction, it's very important to note in the ordinance is Exhibit C, and it talks about the buildings. And in essence, this is Exhibit C, and what we have up here is building number 1 will be built on the southern portion of the property. That's the office building right here. Mr. Skibout plans to build that building in 2021, so that's an office use. Buildings 2 and 3 are limited to trade services uses. So the intention is for Mr. Skibout's business to move to buildings 2 and 3 in the future. As far as allowable use and the layout, the general layout, what the ordinance requires is this is what's allowed on the property right here. Any deviations, the plan, this general plan as far as the layout on here or uses requires an amendment to the zoning ordinance. From a practical standpoint, what the property is limited at the current time and what's being proposed is an office use for building number 1. Buildings number 2 and 3 would be trade services on it as well. So very important to keep in mind, again, once again, we have a conditional rezoning request, and the intention ultimately is to move Mr. Skibout's business down here for buildings 2 and 3 and to have building number 1 as an office building. Also, what's written into the ordinance is buildings 2 and 3 must be completed within 5 years of building number 1 receiving a certificate of occupancy. And when we talk about certificate of occupancies, what that means is that once the building is built, our building inspector will review the building. If it meets all city code requirements, we'll issue a certificate of occupancy at that time. So it means the building is required to be built to city standards. At that time, Mr. Skibout has 5 years to commence constructions on buildings 2 and 3 on this as well. Or actually must be completed within 5 years of this. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as far as the comprehensive plan is concerned, the comprehensive plan, once again, when we talk about the comprehensive plans, it's important to note that we need to take in the entirety of the document, all 147 pages of the document. At the time, the city's comprehensive plan did identify the area as high-density residential with this as well. And as we stated earlier in the presentation, one of the big issues of the comprehensive plan, anytime you do a rezoning request, is analyzing land use compatibility issues. Once again, what the comprehensive plan noted is the M1 or proposed M1 is compatible with the CC districts here. And also it has scores of 3 out of 5 on the ag districts that it abuts as well. So once again, that is the reason for the conditional recommendations this evening as well. But when we look at the high-density residential, it is important to note that there is a need in the comprehensive plan for additional industrial development within our community. So far as the land acreage needs is there is additional need for additional land issues or rezoning or additional land dedicated for industrial use. So in looking at the comprehensive plan, once again, you got to judge the entire document on here. This is the future use land map. I could also say, as far as other key goals in the plan, one of them is economic development within the city and building the tax base on it as well. What Mr. Skibout is proposing is a 3-building build-out on this lot that's a currently vacant parcel. It meets a key goal of the city's strategic plan, or comprehensive plan, which is economic development. So please keep that in mind as we talk about alignment with the comprehensive plan. Oftentimes it's a judgment, but it's a judgment on the entire document in its entirety. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. And I believe we've covered a lot of this, and from our standpoint, once again, we believe that the proposed rezoning aligns with the key strategic priority of the city's comprehensive plan. Ultimately, we believe that based on that alignment, the key strategic goal of the comprehensive plan, along with the agreement by the developer for a conditional rezoning request, when you look at the uses on it, we have office and trade services, plus a layout of the proposed buildings, plus agreement to design standards for the buildings as well. We believe those conditional uses address any type of land use compatibility issues that may arise in the future as a result of the new buildings on there. So overall, our judgment in the matter is we believe this request aligns with the city's comprehensive plan. Well, let's go ahead, please, Mandy. And I believe on slide 9 on this, I've already stated that. It is important to note, from our standpoint, city staff, city administration believes this aligns with the city's comprehensive plan. It is important to note that the Planning and Zoning Commission did discuss this rezoning ordinance at their April 5th meeting and unanimously approved the ordinance that we are considering this evening. So with that, Mr. Mayor, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor or council may have on this item.
Thanks, Mike. Any written comments, Mandy?
No written comments.
Council, your turn. Comments, questions?
I have no concerns about what's being proposed today, but looking at the future, you also own the land to the east? Yes. Okay. If the day comes to develop that, how do you access that?
There is, the way it's planted right now, Mark, on the north side of the property, or the old property line, there's a 60-foot easement, right-of-way easement that's drawn in on the plot plan.
Okay,
And that's how,
excellent. I didn't want to create an island.
no, right. No, there's a 60-foot easement on the north side of that property that will run back.
Great.
Do we have, you want to go back to the map where it showed just the M1, the color? Do we have any other property, you talked about the adjacent, are there any other areas in the city that an M1 might be isolated by itself?
I don't know if I'd use the terminology isolated in this case. We do have M1 that's in fairly close proximity. It is important to note, and I was remiss, and thank you for reminding me. This would have been in approximately the summer of 2020. We approved another rezoning request. It's very similar to this. This request was by Mr. Jeff Dingaman, and I believe that particular request was 7 acres. If you were to go out on the western side of the community where West 12th terminates, it's the 7 acres, I believe, right around there that are just north of that for Mr. Dingaman. This zoning ordinance is almost taken in entirely the same ordinance as what we had for Mr. Dingaman. So that was the one other request that I could think of that was very similar to the mechanics of this. This one actually goes above and beyond because what we, unlike Mr. Dingaman's, what we have is a map of the exact building layouts and also informing us what those uses would be. So it's more limited than Mr. Dingaman's was back in 2020. But it's very similar, so that would be another case where you were to look at the M1 on their conditional M1.
And then the second question I had to get built in 2021, I heard that all good roofers and electricians are already booked up.
The window was closed. I have to agree.
Anything else, council?
Pretty impressive building. Brick building. Pretty impressive.
I hate to clean.
But same.
Okay, any comments from a member of the audience concerning this particular item? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Young, Vanderhorst, any discussion? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Young,
Yes.
Randall,
Yes.
Danstruck,
Yes.
Skiba,
Abstain.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Score.
Yes.
Motion passed. Okay, now moving on to item 1B, ordinance number 991, entitled an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Pella, Iowa by conditionally amending the boundaries of the M1 district to include the property legally described in Exhibit A and directing the planning and zoning director to note the ordinance number and date of this change on the official zoning map. This is the first reading. Assume there's nothing to add, Mike?
You are correct, sir.
Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Brander, Horst, Hopkins. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Score,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Danstruck,
Yes.
Skiba.
Abstain.
Motion passed.
And I'll make a motion to suspend the rules and waive the second and third hearing.
Okay, is there support?
Support.
Banstra,
Yep.
Brander, Horst, motion
Can we
to
do
suspend
another
the
reading?
second, third readings. Discussion.
Can we do another reading?
Sure.
I just, you know, because public looks, will see it. I thank you, Calvin, but I just think we should do another reading.
If you're comfortable with that.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten good feedback, and there's things that we can do to proceed,
Okay.
just going through this, but at least public has a chance to input. I appreciate it.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
Withdraw the motion or vote?
Yeah, can you withdraw the motion in the second?
I think you can.
Okay.
You just voted down.
People voted against me.
We haven't had this happen yet since we've been on board, so you can withdraw, right?
Yeah. So withdraw.
Okay, moving on to petitions and communications. Item 1, temporary outdoor service privileges on a Class C liquor license for Dutch 200 Bowl and Grill. Mike, please explain.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Once again, I'd like to direct the council's attention to the big board for a brief presentation on this item. And for those following at home, I'm on slide number 10. Tonight's request comes to us from the Dutch 200 Bowl and Grill. It's currently located at 204 Southeast 9th Street. And specifically, they've applied for 6 months temporary outdoor service privilege on their Class C liquor license. Now, as far as the overall purpose of the request, it is important to know that the purpose of this request is to host bike nights on the dates that we have here, approximately 6 dates that we have up here as well. It is important to note that the applicant is proposing the outdoor service area for the bike nights would be an area that would extend from their building, encompassing the entire parking lot. We're going to talk about that request, and somewhat unique for us as well. In addition, we've also highlighted up here on a picture what the applicant is proposing to do as far as the rope and fence that would enclose the area if approved by the City Council this evening. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, overall, we have a map and schematic view on slide 11 of the area on this as well. One of the items that's fairly unique, at least it's the first time that we've had this request on here, is according to the city code, businesses required to have 56 paved off-street parking spaces. Now, as far as the requested outdoor service area, what they're hoping to do or would like to have done is for the red highlighted area, I believe, to be designated as the parking area on this as well. And so the bike night and the display area would be within this area, and this would be the roped off area as well. And it's our understanding from this as well that Brewmark Incorporated is given permission for the parking to occur on this as well, on the grassy area. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, since we've never ran across this, we did consult with the city attorney, and it's the city attorney's legal opinion that the zoning administrator, which is currently myself, has the authority to approve temporary parking on grass for events. And so with this, after evaluating it and proposed 6 nights of potential parking on grass, we're ready to have a conditional approval. What the conditional is if council approves the overall event and the temporary liquor license for the 6 bike nights tonight. So again, please keep in mind that this is the first time that we've been through this process allowing temporary parking on it. Our thoughts are, when you look at the 6 dates on it, we thought it was a reasonable event, a reasonable request under the circumstances. But we wanted to make sure that council, that was full disclosure on council's standpoint, that this is somewhat of a unique request and there could be others in the future on it as well. So from our standpoint, again, we reviewed it. We believe it's a reasonable request, a reasonable time frame for a temporary variance from the city's parking requirements. And our recommendation is we're ready to approve it, subject to council approving the temporary outdoor liquor license for the events that's being requested this evening. So Mandy, is that it on this one? Okay, one more. Alrighty, it is important to note that the application is, our understanding, has been completed with the state of Iowa and is pending a drum shop certification. And therefore, if council would wish to approve this temporary outdoor services privileges for the 6 requested dates, it would be contingent upon receipt of the drum shop certification. And also, it is important to note that the second one is something that we've been doing for temporary events or special events on there, that with the understanding, and the developer or the applicant is aware of this, that if either the governor or there's a local order that would issue that would prohibit events like this due to the pandemic, the current COVID-19 pandemic, the event will not be able to occur as well. And they are aware of that as well. And once again, from the zoning administrator standpoint, we are ready to approve but it's based on council's approval of the overall event and the 6 events as well. So with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes our presentation this evening. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor or council may have on this item.
Thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Randorf, Spore. So just so everybody understands that pass this or issue this temporary permit, then Mike is going to authorize parking on the grass. Everybody understands that. It's kind of a package deal, right?
Yep.
Have you I guess a question, if you have 3 inches of rain the night before, is you still going to have them parked on your grass? Okay.
It's just an old alfalfa field.
He'll just
Probably do it good.
He'll just charge him for towing them away.
They'll get in, but they won't get out.
That was first my breast.
Just curious, what night of the week is that?
Friday,
Fridays?
second Friday of the month.
Okay.
Mike, and sometimes you run this by different departments like Public Works or Police or anything. Has that been done?
Yes, from our standpoint, we had, it's been reviewed by city administration, and I believe the police department's also reviewed it due to the liquor license as well. And so overall, when it gets to zoning, though, just to be very clear, when it gets to the zoning issues and parking on grass, that's pure P&Z at that standpoint. So I can tell you there was a discussion with the city administration staff and planning and zoning as well on the parking on grass. So yes, we have vetted it, city departments.
What kind of fence are we talking about?
We're going to use a brightly colored rope with signs attached to it, and then colored bands around the rope so that it's easily seen.
There you go.
We also plan on hiring security as well to maintain this.
Stay within the perimeter. There is also, we have talked about at one time about doing a hurricane fence, a little bit more support. Well, it depends on the house. Keep them in.
Yeah, there could be a lot of wandering with alcohol. That's my concern. Otherwise, I like the idea. We're going to get into rotation, huh?
Anything else? All right, so all in favor of the motion, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Randorf,
Yes.
Spore,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes?
Armstrong,
Yes.
Eval,
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Motion passed. Thanks for planning these events. Moving on to item 2, temporary outdoor service extension on a Class C liquor license for for Nederlanders Tap and Golf. Mike?
Yes, Mayor, and once again, as Mayor Ward stated, this request comes to us from Nederlanders Tap and Golf that is located at 514 Main Street. For those following at home on slide number 14, this particular request is for an outdoor service extension on their Class C liquor license and for a very limited time, I believe to correspond with the annual Tulip Time event. The request that we're entertaining this evening is for May 5th through May 9th on this. And as far as the outdoor service area, we do have a proposed outdoor service area. We do have a schematic review of the outdoor service area on slide number 14 as well. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as far as the area overall, it's roughly a 56 by 25 space, and we also believe that the same fence that is currently used for the applicants, which meets state code requirements as well. Now, from city staff's standpoint, I believe this has been a previous year's request as well from the Nederlanders. We are recommending conditional approval of the request, very similar to what we did with the previous request, and then the main request with the understanding that if orders are given by the state of Iowa's governor or local orders in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic, this event may need to be canceled as well. So with that, that concludes staff's presentation this evening. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Randhorst, Hopkins, discussion?
I only want to have one maybe slight concern, don't know if it's an issue, but just north of that area, those parking spots, are they gonna remain there? Just so somebody doesn't back out and hit the fence, or looks like maybe just a little congested. Otherwise, I'm fine with it. And maybe it's not an issue.
I think I've parked there when that was up last fall, and it wasn't in like the so-called right of way, I guess. I was back now.
That was only 16 feet out then, now it's 25.
Gotcha. So it's not, it's longer, it goes to the end of the
Sticks
building.
out from the building.
And it
This
goes
is a request to enlarge the current space, so it is.
two directions, right?
Yeah.
I just a concern. I'm
Did
for
you
it.
do this last year, Chad?
Well, we didn't have Tulip Time last year.
Oh, that's right. Thanks for reminding me.
But regarding how deep it goes into the parking lot, as you can kind of see with the orange line, it doesn't even make it halfway, not even 3/4 of that parking lot. So the north side of the parking lot will still have plenty of space to pull in and out.
Yeah, it's fine. Just got a concern about that.
Anything else? All right, so all in favor of the motion, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanderhorst?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ford? Yes. DeYoung?
Yes.
Anstra?
Abstain.
Seabout?
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 3, new special Class C liquor license, beer and wine with Sunday sales privileges for Ironside Axe Club. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, as Mayor DeWard stated, this request comes to us this evening from Ironside Axe Club, which is located at 1518 Washington Street. And specifically, the request that we're considering this evening is for a new special Class C liquor license with Sunday sales privilege. Now, if approved by the City Council, it would be effective for May 1st of this year, and the term of the new license would be for 12 months. It is important to note that the application has been completed online with the state and is pending drum shop certification. So that, once again, we do have a conditional approval this evening, pending receipt of the drum shop certification. And Mandy, is that everything for the request this evening? So, Mr. Mayor, that concludes our presentation. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval? Hopkins, for. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ford? Yes. DeYoung?
Yes.
Vanderhorst?
Yes.
Anstra?
Yes.
Seabout?
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to administration reports, setting May 18, 2021 as a public hearing date for amending the fiscal year 2021 budget. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, as Mayor DeWard stated, this request comes to us, and all we're simply doing is establishing May 18th, 2021 as the proposed date for consideration of a budget amendment to the city's 2021 budget. The budget that we're talking about is our current fiscal year that expires or ends on June 30th, 2021. We want to stress the reason for this amendment is simply to address timing issues, and what we're talking about is projects that may be occurring in the current fiscal year, which is 2021, that might have been budgeted in 2022 and vice versa. So in essence, from a budgetary standpoint, what we're simply doing is shifting our programming dollars or funding from one fiscal year to the next. I want to stress for the mayor and council, as a result of the amendment, there will not be an increase in property taxes or utility rates as a result of the amendment. It is purely for just to adjust for timing differences. But once again, all we're simply doing is establishing tonight, May 18th, is the public hearing date for proposed budget amendment number 1 for the city's fiscal year 2021 budget. And as council is aware, this is typically done on an annual basis in the spring of each year. So with that, that concludes our presentation, Mr. Mayor. Be more than happy to answer questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval? Skibout? DeYoung, discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Skibout.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
Stanser.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Ford. Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to resolutions. Item number 1, resolution number 6282, entitled Resolution Entering into a 2080 Agreement between Indianola Municipal Utilities and the City of Pella Telecommunications Utility, providing for joint ownership and use of certain facilities and related matters. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. For those following at home, I'm on slide number 18. And as Mayor DeWard stated, what this resolution would do would approve a 2080 agreement. And for those of you that are not familiar with 2080, what that is reference to Iowa Code 2080E. And whenever you hear about a 2080 agreement, it's simply a reference of a contract between governmental entities. Tonight's proposed contract that we're entertaining is an ownership agreement with Indianola Municipal Utilities for local television channel broadcasting equipment. And specifically, what we're talking about when we talk about local channels, we're talking about those channels in the Des Moines metro area. This would be 5, 8, 13, and Fox as well on there. In addition, there may be some auxiliary cable channels associated with ESPN that are covered under the agreement. Now, as far as the head end is concerned, and the reason why it makes sense to partner with Indianola is currently receiving these signals from Cedar Falls. They've already invested in the equipment that we need. We are in the same TV local coverage area as Indianola. We're actually in the Des Moines metro coverage area as far as television stations are concerned. So it makes sense for us to partner with Indianola Municipal Utilities for this equipment. So let's go ahead on slide 19, please. Now, it is important to note that the term of the agreement that we are considering this evening is for 4 years. And as far as the initial buy-in of the capital fee, and once again, Indianola's already made this investment into the system, is our share of the $75,000 that would be buy into the initial equipment to be able to receive the local channels for telefiber is right around just shy of $31,000, and that's right at 40.66%. How that was determined was based off the number of households passed. Indianola's system's a little bit bigger than the City of Pella's, so a lion's share of the costs are going to be with the City of Indianola. As far as the annual operating and maintenance fees, we're just shy of $2,400 on an annual basis with this. So in summary, Mr. Mayor, staff is recommending approval of the proposed 2080, which is a government contract with Indianola Municipal Utilities. And once again, we believe it's more economical to partner with other cities or other utilities in this case to provide services for our citizens with this. And finally, I'd like to mention that the city attorney has reviewed and approved the proposed agreement that we are considering this evening. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor and council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
Support.
DeYoung, Skibout, any discussion?
Michael, is that wireless? Will that be, or is it?
It's the standard broadcast channels that are broadcast from Des Moines, so the 5, 8, 13.
So it's just a.
Just a big antenna.
Yeah, but it'll probably come off same antennas up there. It's just the contract.
So they'll transmit the signal to CFU, and CFU will transmit it to us. So
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an important point. Indian Knoll is in the same head end as CFU as the City of Pella. So they're already receiving these, will receive these. They invest in this equipment to receive the Des Moines Metro. We're the second city in the area that's a part of the CFU equipment, that's a part of the Des Moines local channel viewing area. That's why we need this agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Ego.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Moore. Yes. Reindeerhorst.
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 2, resolution number 6283, entitled Resolution Appointing UMB Bank N.A. of West Des Moines, Iowa to serve as paying agent, note registrar, and transfer agent, approving the paying agent, note registrar, and transfer agent agreement, and authorizing the execution of the agreement. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. On this item, we have kind of a group presentation this evening. The first presentation that we'll be covering is for the proposed Geo-Urban Renewal Capital Loan Notes. That's 2021. For those following at home, I'm on slide number 20. It's very important to keep in mind what this resolution would actually do would approve a loan agreement for the issuance of $2,025,000 worth of general obligation urban renewal capital loan notes. And as you can see from the detail listed up here on the big board, we have a lot of infrastructure projects that are necessary that this proposed bond issue will be to fund. What the intention of this bond issue is in support of Lely, North America's new corporate headquarters facility. As council is aware, but for those following at home, Lely has decided to build their new corporate headquarters facility in our community. It's located in the southeastern area of our community, just southwest of exit 40, I believe, off Highway 163 is a 65-acre development. The proposed project by Lely is roughly a $22 million project. It's going to be the retention of 53 jobs, plus the addition of 15 additional high-paying jobs within our community. We're very fortunate to have Lely within Pella. In order to make this happen, we need to extend public infrastructure to the site to make it developable ready. And as you can see from the detail that we have up here, totals just over $2 million in funding that we have listed up here, net funding for the proposed bond issue. That includes a lift station, water main, street improvements, engineering, and we've also factored into the account the DOT RISE grant that we are receiving as well. So let's go ahead, please, Corey. Now, as far as the bond issue is concerned this evening, and that's what we're really here to talk tonight about, is the supporting documents, what it takes to actually approve a bond issue. We did hold a public hearing on this, or consider this item at our April 6th meeting as well. The bond that we're talking about this evening, the total amount, the par amount, is $2,025,000. We do have a premium that's being paid by the investors for our bonds at just over $35,000. Now, the all-important factor to consider this evening is the true interest cost on the proposed bond issue, and as you can see, it's just over 1.65%, which is an outstanding interest rate that we're able to garner for these bonds. Now, we do have a tentative 20-year bond issue, and I would like to be remiss if I didn't explain the repayment of these bonds that we are considering this evening. We got Lely's building a new $22 million corporate headquarters facility. Construction of that facility will be occurring this year, and it's scheduled to be operational by 2022. What we're going to do is we're going to capture the new valuations of that area. If you were to drive out there, it's a farm field. With the urban renewal plan that we've previously approved from this, we're going to capture the incremental tax valuations, and ultimately those valuations are going to be used to pay back this bond issue on it as well. So again, what we're approving tonight is about 1.65%. There'll be a little bit of a lag time that'll have to be subsidized from the general fund and payment of the initial bond principal. But ultimately, everything is scheduled to be paid back through the new valuations of Lely North American as well. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as far as the agenda items that we have tonight, item H2, which is resolution 6283, for those following at home, I'm on slide number 2. Simply appoints and approves an agreement with the paying agent, registered transfer agent, and also authorizes execution of the agreement. Agenda item H3, which is resolution 6284, approves and authorizes the form of the loan agreement. Also provides issuance and levying and tax to pay the notes if necessary, and approves the tax exemption certificate as well as the continuing disclosure requirements. Some of these items are standard course of business for bond issues on there, and it spells out, for instance, the disclosure certificate. spells out items that we are required to notify the bondholders on in the case the City of Pella runs into difficulties in the future. So once again, the overall result is we have an interest rate of 1.65%. The city's credit rating was also upheld at a AA3, which is a very good credit rating in the state of Iowa for mid-sized cities such as Pella. In fact, outside the Des Moines metro area, when you look at communities our size, that is very, very, very strong. I'd like to emphasize that as well. So again, this item in the presentation is in regards to items H2 and H3. And Mr. Mayor, that concludes our presentation this evening. I'm more than happy to answer any questions the Mayor and Council may have on this item.
All right. So can I get a motion for approval of resolution number 6283 first?
So moved.
Answer DeYoung. Any discussion?
Is that single or double tax exempt?
That should be double tax exempt, both federal and state level, correct?
Okay. That helps keep it low.
Is there a sunset or a time period on the payback of that?
Well, the bond issue that we're considering this evening is a 20-year bond issue. We have the ability to pay it off after, I believe, the call period on bonds is about 7 years, Corey, is that correct?
Yeah, 2028.
Okay, 7 years. On it. Now, the sunset period on it, keep in mind the urban renewal area that we just approved earlier this year for Laley is a 20-year urban renewal area as well. So, and everything according to our calculations was based on an $8 million project with it. So we believe that number in the building that Laley's building is going to be an above in that. So to answer your question, we can have the increment and the TIF district can collect the incremental valuations off the Laley development for 20 years, which we believe will be sufficient to pay back this bond.
We could, but we shouldn't. Because that's free money, basically. We could find a lot of other things to do with that extra money. Okay, anything else?
Is a project like this subject to the LMI?
No, LMI, which is for those following at home, maybe in the audience, what Councilmember DeYoung is referring to as low and moderate income requirements. Generally, low and moderate income requirements are TIF. There's requirements 8 time you deal with residential developments on this, and that's the state requirements on as far as LMI requirements. We've been very careful with our TIF districts. If you notice, when we propose TIF districts, we try to separate residential TIF districts from commercial and industrial TIF districts. This is an industrial development. The property is zoned for into heavy industrial. It's also the uses that are encouraging through the zoning ordinance on the conditional uses for head into, so the residential is not allowed on this property. So there should not be any LMI requirements for this property, or for this urban renewal, excuse me.
Anything else? Okay, we're ready to vote. So all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeAnstruck?
Yes.
DeYoung?
Yes.
Rainbow?
Yes.
Skibout?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ford?
Motion passed. Okay, moving on to item 3, resolution number 6284, entitled Resolution Approving and Authorizing a Form of Loan Agreement, Authorizing and Providing for the Issuance of $2,025,000 General Obligation Urban Renewal Capital Loan Note, Series 2021A, and levying a tax to pay said notes, approval of the tax exemption certificate and continuing disclosure certificate. I assume there's nothing to add, Mike?
You're correct, sir.
Okay, so now I need a motion for approval of resolution number 6284.
So moved.
Mr. Hopkins, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeAnstruck?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ford? Yes. DeYoung?
Yes.
Rainbow?
Yes.
Skibout?
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 4, resolution number 6285, entitled Resolution Appointing UMB Bank N.A. of West Des Moines, Iowa to serve as paying agent, note registrar, and transfer agent, approving the paying agent, note registrar, and transfer agent agreement, and authorizing the execution of the agreement. Same deal, just another
Yes,
issue,
sir.
right? All
Yes,
right.
sir.
Okay, so talk us through this one.
Okay, Mandy, what resolution are we on? If you could help me out, please.
6285.
6285, and that's a resolution appointing UMB Bank. Okay, and this is again 6285. Okay, I'm with it. I apologize. So,
Weren't you listening?
yeah, I'm sorry, Mayor.
I I spit out all those words and you didn't hear them, and you're sitting next to me?
I think I got thrown off when Councilmember DeYoung asked about LMI, so forgive me. Okay, all right, okay. Well, again, as Mayor DeWard stated, what we have this evening is we have another proposed bond issue. This one's 2021B, and specifically the agreements, and again, we have a group presentation for both of these resolutions that we're considering this evening. And they're in support of $1,885,000 worth of general obligation capital loan notes for this. Now, ultimately, the purpose and source of these are really two projects that we have this evening. The first project that we have is the paving or proposed upgrade to an urban cross-section street, 218th Avenue and Neal Drive. And this would be an area that's shown on slide number 23 for those following at home that connects off Idaho Drive down to the Shady Brook subdivision project that we have right here. City Soccer Complex is located right here. This is an existing hard surface and gravel road within our community, and the proposed bond issue is proposing to upgrade it to an urban cross-section street, which is fancy for a regular city street, which is a concrete street that we have along with the sidewalk area. Second item that we have is for the airport wildlife fence that was actually constructed last year on the property at the Pella Municipal Airport, which is showing up here on the big board. The wildlife fence is an important safety item for aviation as well. When you look at the total uses of this, we're totaling just over $1.9 million for it. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as far as the bond issue that we're considering this evening, very, very similar to the previous presentation as far as the terms, so I won't spend a lot of time on there. Again, when we look at the interest rate, this one's actually a slight bit lower, just below 1.64%. Again, a 20-year term bond. We believe the interest rate is very, very attractive that we have, and we're very fortunate to get that as well. It is important to note when we talk about this particular bond issue, we do have the ability, we will need to levy a debt service tax levy for this bond. But as the council is aware, during our financial planning during the FY, actually 21-22 budget that we just came off the heels of, we actually had this proposed bond issue in our financial projections as well. So even though we are levying a debt service levy, we do not believe it's going to increase the city's overall levy rate or taxes and result in additional taxes for the citizens of Pella. Well, let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as far as the items, as Mayor Ward stated, item number H4 tonight, which is Resolution 6285, simply appoints and approves the agreement with the paying agent, note register, and transfer agent, and also authorizes execution of the agreement. Resolution 6286, which is item number H5, amends and authorizes the form of loan agreement and provides for the issuance of levy and tax to pay the notes. And once again, even though we're doing that, we believe the city's overall tax rate will not increase as a result of this bond issue as well. So with that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes staff's presentation this evening. More than happy to answer any questions the mayor or council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval of resolution number 6285?
So moved.
Support.
Branderhorst DeYoung, any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Branderhorst?
Yes.
DeYoung?
Yes.
Danstruck?
Yes.
Eno?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Spore?
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 5, moving on to resolution number 6286, entitled Resolution Amending Resolution Approving and Authorizing a Form of Loan Agreement and Authorizing and Providing for the Issuance of $1,885,000 General Obligation Capital Loan Note Series 2021B and levying a tax to pay said notes, approval of the tax exemption certificate and continuing disclosure certificate. Can I get a motion for approval?
Support?
Hopkins, Spore, any discussion?
I got one quick, I don't mean to be sidetracked, but Denny, is that fence out there doing its thing?
Yes, now that we have a gate on the
Yeah.
calendar,
Good,
so
thank
far
you,
so good.
thank you.
You get in now, they're not having to jump over or been dropped from the outside.
Been planted by somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, all in favor of the motion to approve resolution number 6286, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Spore? Yes. DeYoung?
Yes.
Branderhorst?
Yes.
Danstruck?
Yes.
Eno?
Yes. Motion passed. Okay, moving on to ordinances, item number 1, ordinance number 990, entitled an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Pella, Iowa by changing the zoning classification of property generally located at 503 Main Street, City of Pella, Marion County, Iowa. This is the second reading. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Once again, I'd like to direct the Mayor and Council's attention to the big board for a presentation on this item. For those following at home, I'm on slide number 6. As Mayor DeWart stated, the proposed ordinance this evening would amend the zoning district for 3 vacant properties that are located at 503 Main Street to a planned unit development. And we're going to be explaining later on in the presentation what exactly a planned unit development is, but it's very important to keep in mind that this is a PUD, and we'll be explaining that. Now, associated with any PUD, it is important to note that the base zoning district that we are talking about this evening would remain a mixed-use commercial zoning district. Now, as far as the location of the rezoning request on slide number 26, it's yellow highlighted area. Now, most folks, if they were to recall where this is located at near the intersection of 503 Main Street and Independence Street, they would refer to it as the area of the former big yellow house on there. So if you hear that reference to tonight's presentation, you know exactly the area that we're talking about as well. Now, as far as a PUD, it's very, very important to keep in mind, as we discussed at April 6th, that a PUD under City Code is for unique projects under the City Code. And we'll certainly explain the uniqueness of this, but this project is unique for a couple different reasons. A, what's being proposed by the developer for this site is the proposed Pella Market, which is intended to be similar to the Gateway Market in Des Moines. We do have a description of the services that are being proposed for the Pella Market listed up on the big board, but from staff's perspective, when you look at the proposal to bring the Gateway Market type environment to a town of 10,000 in rural Iowa, it's a very unique proposal. The second item to keep in mind, and we're going to be elaborating much more on this, is the urban renewal area that we're talking about is actually the Webster Park urban renewal area that was approved, and as council knows that we spent several amount of time on redevelopment on this issue. The reason we had to spend a lot of time on redevelopment on this issue is if you look what was used to be on this property, both the yellow house here was traditionally a code enforcement issue for the City of Pella and problematic. In addition, the former Webster School site was located on the new South Main project as well. So from an urban renewal standpoint, both of these properties are one and the same from the South Main development as well as the proposed site for the Pella Market. I'm going to be explaining why that is an important piece of information to keep in mind as we discuss the planned unit development this evening. Mandy, let's go ahead, please. What we have listed up on the board is slide number 27. This is a very important slide. It's one of the key exhibits under the proposed planned unit development. And what this is the overall layout of the site for the Pella Market. And as you can see, we have, when we talk about the Pella Market, we're talking about roughly a 6,600 square foot facility on there as well. In case you're wondering, we have roughly 14 on-site parking spaces. And the reason why I'm showing this up here, this layout, is the developer under the PUD is obligated to build the site according to this layout that we have listed up here on the big board. And this matches also the site plan, which was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission as well. So keep this in mind whenever we refer to exhibits. The developer is obligated to proceed with this as outlined on Exhibit 1, or this exhibit that we're showing up here on slide number 27. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, one of the key items that I would tell you, you're going to hear me talking through the planned unit development. When we talk about the planned unit development, we're talking about unique projects that are needed in our community from the city standpoint. Planned unit developments are different from a traditional rezoning. It's a negotiated item, which means this is a negotiated process. It's unlike a traditional rezoning, so please keep this in mind. Some items that we're talking about this evening that are necessary for this project to occur are above and beyond the requirements of the city ordinances that we have. Some items are actually being relaxed in order to allow the project to occur. So again, it's a negotiated process with the developer. One of the things you have to have under a PUD is you have to have a willing developer in this case. When we look at this site and we look at items under the design standards, the reason I'm mentioning this is what the ordinance requires the look of the Pella Market to be, what you're seeing up here on the big board. The developer spent an extensive amount of time on the design of the Pella Market. We heard at the last council meeting the history on the design of this market, how it's rooted in the Netherlands. On this as well, they spent an extensive amount of time The important part is under the proposed ordinance, what this says is the developer is obligated to build what we're showing up here on the big board. So there's no misunderstanding on the type of building that will be approved by tonight with the city council in consideration. So the ordinance requires the developer to build a building such as this. This is one of the items that I would say is above and beyond city code requirements, is the design of the building. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, as we stated before, PUDs are different than a traditional rezoning request. Please keep this in mind. This is a negotiated process. From our standpoint, if you look at the Webster Park urban renewal area, this was a blighted area. The big yellow house, Webster School. We're talking about redevelopment. Now, all of a sudden, we're looking at two projects here. The South Main development, this is the second project here as well. When you're looking at it from a developer standpoint, and this site, specifically where the big yellow house is, this is a constrained site that you have. And so from the city's standpoint, we're trying to attract a developer to come in and put on something that would be very nice for the community, is needed for the community, aligns with our comprehensive plan. That's the goal of it. This is a negotiated process. Some standards that we're talking about this evening are above and beyond what we require applicants under the normal processes under city code. Some of them are being relaxed. But regardless of any which way you look at it, the reality is redevelopment in your downtown. Oftentimes cities have to make special concessions to have redevelopment in your downtown, and we're going to be going through those as well. But the ultimate goal of tonight is to have a very comprehensively planned project with this as well. It is important to note that this proposed PUD was reviewed by city staff, along with Meester and Kim, who's a professional engineer on this matter as well. And overall, we believe that the property and the development was planned in a comprehensive manner and in accordance with city code. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, one of the items when we talk about PUDs, you heard me state earlier, this is a process that is not like a normal rezoning. It's a negotiated process. It's based off a need for the city. If you were to go back in 2017-18 when we first started the process, the reality is the picture on slide 30, what you see was the big yellow house. Code enforcement issue for the City of Pella. We also had the old Webster School District right here. So what we did back in 2018, we hired a consultant to look at this general area in town. What the consultant looked at it is they evaluated the area that you see up here on slide number 30. That's this diagonal area right up here, this general area. They evaluated it for blight standards under Iowa law. And what they found out is in that general area, when you look at the diagonal lines running through it, roughly 75% of the properties within that general area were blighted under Iowa law. It's a very thick report. It took a lot of time to plan. The reason I'm mentioning this is when you look at the blight standards right here, and when we looked at is we looked at the blighted area that we had, which included the big yellow house where you see where the Pella Market is right now, and the Webster School. We took that information and the city council made a declaration of blighted at the time of the property. And as far as I know, it's the only area that's been declared as a blighted area within the city, it's City of Pella. What we did after that is we formed an urban renewal area. The urban renewal area that you're looking at is the same area as the South Main development. And the reason I'm stating this is one of the goals of the urban renewal area was the Webster Park urban renewal area. One of the goals was the elimination of blight through economic development. Please keep that in mind. That's very, very important. So as we look at the PUD on it, it's important to understand where we came from. The reality is we had blighted properties that were located on both these properties. Since that time, we've struck an agreement with the developer to build the South Main development. They're currently in phase 2 of the development. It's turned out to be a very nice development. In fact, actually, it's a showcase development for the state of Iowa on this. The second project that's being proposed is the Pella Market tonight as well. Very important to keep in mind when we talk about what is unusual or different. A, it's what the developer is proposing. The Pella Market, bringing the Des Moines market to Pella, Iowa. It's a very nice concept, especially when you consider a town of 10,000 in rural Iowa. That is a very nice amenity to have in our community. Second item to keep in mind is this was a blighted area. So we're trying to work with developers in redeveloping this area. That's one of the stated goals of the urban renewal plan. It's important to note when we look at that urban renewal plan on the matter as well, that please keep in mind that in looking at that area, at the time the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council reviewed that urban renewal plan, there was a finding that aligned with the city's comprehensive plan. We still believe that's the case today when we talk about that. So I thought it was very good to talk about where we came from as we consider the PUD this evening, because that's a very, very important concept tonight. So let's go ahead with this. Now, when we talk about the items that we have, if you recall, I stated this is a negotiated process. It's been going on for some time with the developer. We're trying to strike a win-win with the developer. What we're ultimately trying to do is we're trying to redevelop a blighted area within our community. We're also trying to bring an amenity that's needed to the community as well. In addition, we're trying to work with the developers so they can actually build the project they need to have in order to be a sustainable business model. And as if you recall, I said there's certain enhanced items under this PUD ordinance, just like there are in other PUD ordinances that are above and beyond city code requirements, and there's some that have been relaxed to allow development to happen on the site. One of the items that we want to make sure the council is aware that's been relaxed, or that we are working with the developer on, is the parking on site. It is important to note, under city code, the city code identified 38 spaces for parking. What's being provided on site is 14. What the developer is proposing, and what's in part of the agreement, is there's an agreement with First Baptist Church and South Main LLC to use their new parking lot, and also the existing First Baptist Church parking lot as well, to satisfy their parking requirements. And looking at this, it is important to note that we've had our engineering firm review the requirements for parking, and they've given us a report, and one of the observations that Mainstream Kim noted, and this is something that we do need to probably review at the council level for future, is they've stated that parking in the downtown is different than parking in your main commercial districts. The report that they gave us is that they noted that roughly 60% of the parking needs that you have listed in your outer areas are needed in the downtown. So from their standpoint, they believe most times that 14-space parking lot is going to be sufficient for the development, but there will be occasionally times where they will need to use the parking lot across from the south side of Independence Street as well. Well, let's go ahead, please, Mandy, for slide number 32. It is also important to note that B&K did review pedestrian traffic and just traffic in general around the Pella market. We spent a lot of time with it. One of the things they noted, when you look at the site, it is a constrained site. We're trying to redevelop in the downtown. It's going to be a constrained site on it. And one of the things they looked at was pedestrian traffic crossing from the south side of Independence Street to the Pella market. And what they recommended to the city council is once we have known the actual traffic and the amount of pedestrian traffic that is going and crossing the street, we'll have a better feel if there's any additional enhanced safety measures that we need to have for the pedestrian traffic that goes across here. And specifically, I'm talking about crosswalks on this as well. And so their recommendation is to continue to monitor, determine the actual traffic that needs to go across as well. And Mandy, for the next slide, if you could jump to slide number 65 for me. Okay, let's go back, actually maybe a little off. Let's go to the P&Z review of the Pella market. There we go. Okay. Now, as was stated earlier, was on the design requirements. I want to make sure we're very clear on what we're voting on tonight. The ordinance that we have has design requirements in the Pella market. There are actually numerous exhibits with the Pella market. That's one of the items that was a negotiated process with the developer and looking at redevelopment of this site. Again, when you look at it, this is a negotiated item. At April 6th, we heard a very long presentation about the design, where it came from, the elements, and it's deep-rooted in Dutch history on this as well. The ordinance that we're considering this evening waives the city's design requirements at CDC, and the reason why this is important that I'm talking about is this is consistent with what we've done with other PUDs. And when you look at this urban renewal area, again, this is the same urban renewal area as South Main. Very important to note, we faced the same set of circumstances in 2018 when you're looking at South Main. That was the former Webster school site on it as well. These same design requirements were waived in the PUD for the South Main. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that South Main development also had both residential design requirements as well as commercial design requirements. The Pella market just has commercial design requirements as well. And what the thought was, when you look at this area, again, we have a blighted area. The City Council's made a record of determination that it's blighted. It's consistent with the urban renewal area that we've already stated is in accordance with the city's comprehensive plan. The thought is when you have a comprehensively planned development project and you're trying to work with the developer on it, ultimately, under city code, when you look at design standards, ultimately the ultimate responsibility lies with the city council on it. So what the PUD is doing is aligning in that judgment with the Pella City Council on this as well. And that's what's being proposed this evening. We have a design standard, it's in the ordinance as well. As was stated earlier, the P&Z Commission voted on a suggestion on this to remove the design requirements from prior CDC under city code. And Mandy, I think we have this on slide number 67. If we could please, or the following slide on this. It is important to note on this that ultimately under PUDs, when we look at this, the ultimate authority for a PUD is the Pella City Council on the matter. So the reason I'm bringing this up is when you look at CDC and what would happen, just so everyone's very clear on the process, if an applicant were to go to CDC and apply for a design permit, if there's a disagreement between the applicant and CDC on the requirements, ultimately that decision can be appealed to the Pella City Council. The Pella City Council is the final determinant or the final decision maker in matters such as this. So please keep this in mind when we talk about design standards and we talk about trying to recruit and work with the developer on bringing an amenity that is very good, what we believe is a very beneficial amenity to our community. This has been a process that's a negotiated item. Design standards is a negotiated item. And so when we look at the P&Z recommendation, that was a unilateral change to a negotiated agreement. We've checked with the developer. They would like to begin construction on the Pella market. And it's simply because when you look at construction cost on the project, time is on the matter of it could be increased in cost and construction costs. They would like to proceed with this. The design of the building is very important to them. They believe it aligns with the community's values and will fit in with the neighborhood. That's also the opinion of city administration tonight as well. So Mandy, do we have any others on this from slide number 68? It is important to know that, again, the final opinion on this, and when we deal with P&Z, they are simply a recommendation. The final authority on planned unit developments under city code is the Pella City Council on this matter. So, Mandy, if we could go back to our item that we have as far as the comprehensive plan. I want to make sure we talk about this, and once again, we want to talk about the comprehensive plan in its entirety on the matter. That's the whole 147-page book on the comprehensive plan that's listed up on the big board. One of the items that was noted in the comprehensive plan is a gap exists for food and beverage establishments. We believe the Pella market will help fill this. It's noted as a need in the city's comprehensive plan. Furthermore, this section of Main Street is identified as a commercial corridor and economic development area, priority area for the city of Pella in the comprehensive plan. From an alignment standpoint with the city's comprehensive plan, we believe the proposed development strongly aligns with the city's comprehensive plan on it. And that is city staff's recommendation this evening. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. And I believe we stated this, and one of the items we got to keep in mind, this is the proposed second reading of the ordinance. The first reading, the city council approved the ordinance as written, which included the design standards in the ordinance. The mean design standards is the building would be built, what you see up here on the board and what was negotiated with the developer. This is also what's being requested by the developer at this time. Staff's recommendation as well. We believe that this proposed project closely aligns with the city comprehensive plan, and it also strongly aligns with what we envisioned initially when we started the Webster Park urban renewal area, with the hope of attracting developers in for redevelopment, for issues for redevelopment of the area that was occupied at the time by the Big Yellow House and ultimately with Webster School. If you look at what's been done since then, the South Main development has been built. Pella Market is now under consideration for being built on it. And finally, the ordinance that we have as far as design standards is very similar to the South Main development and what we did on the design standards on that as well. So from our standpoint, Mr. Mayor, we believe that the proposed ordinance that we considered tonight strongly aligns with the city's comprehensive plan, and we are recommending approval as submitted. So with that, we're more than happy to answer any questions that the mayor and council may have on this item.
Thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval of ordinance number 990?
Support.
Hopkins, for. Discussion.
I just had one question that with talking about it, future owner 20 years from now, I'll just use the example of neon lights. It was inferred that without having that on there, that can be added because of this PUD. I would think that would not be true, or can that be done?
If you're talking about a change to the exterior, significant change such as neon lights to the ordinance, our opinion, at least city administration, would be that would probably require a zoning change on the matter. What you're seeing on the Pella market as far as the exterior is what's being proposed to be built.
So
So
if the exterior gets altered in a way.
significantly like that, the example,
Consistent
yes.
with that,
Yes.
so that would mean that that's not a valid use of the approval that we just did here.
A significant change to the exterior of the building that goes against the plans of what you see up there would require a rezoning change.
Is that fairly similar to the zoning on Bruce's property that we just looked at, that it's got a specific
Right.
use?
This one's probably nailed down even more on it because when you look at the use, this ordinance has the use as the Pella Market on this site, and the use goes further all to state that the building design needs to resemble this. So things such as neon lights, significant changes, I think was what was probably the reference to, let's just put it this way. Our interpretation, significant exterior elevation changes probably will trigger a rezoning request, which means we're back at this process.
I think it's interesting that maybe one of the pushbacks on this is that this is something that's a design maybe that's never been done. And did we just approve parking the grass lot earlier tonight that has never been done for the sake of the good of businesses, the business community? Seems like it's a different scale for sure, but a similar idea anyways.
Well, I think, just in listening to comments, I think more of the discussion is about the process rather than the design. I haven't heard a lot of pushback against the design, the process, and there's a lot of concern about precedent setting in that anytime we make a decision. But to me, this is such a unique project. It's a PUD, which doesn't happen a lot. It's a blighted area. I don't know if is there any history on blighted areas in Pella? Have we had designated blighted areas before? I don't think so.
I'll put the qualification and on top of urban renewal, I could safely say not since I've been here, and I've been here for 20 years.
So I think this is a unique enough situation that we're not, some of the worries, concerned I heard, I think are not valid. I think that this is unique enough. And to say that there's no precedent for it is not true, because there is a precedent. It happened across the street from it in 2018. The same type of PUD was approved for that particular development. So I don't think that a lot of the concerns expressed are valid on this particular project.
I do think that, like the mayor said, the process, and I happened to be listening in on planning and zoning that night, the process that was changed, and that was really more their concern, that we're kicking out the CDC, if I could put it that way, not having them have a look. And it might have been easier just to let it have a look, because ultimately it's behind this table that's going to decide. But the good part of it is maybe what might happen is this might prompt redefining of the CDC standards. Because I think that could be updated some, as they readily admitted themselves tonight. I like the project a lot. I still have a little problem with all the signage that could really come back and haunt us here. And I would hope that due consideration might be given to that. But otherwise, I love the project.
And I think too, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that the split vote on the council had nothing to do with design. It had to do with due process. It had to do with allowing these individuals to get up there behind that mic and say what was their right to say. And if we rush that process, they don't have that opportunity. And so
Sure.
I think I'm speaking for the other two no votes when I say nothing to do with design, everything to do with due process.
Yeah, you're referring to the voting down of the waiver of the second, third reading,
Yes.
not the
Yes.
actual
Yes.
ordinance itself.
We love all.
The ordinance passed 6-0
Right.
itself, yes. Okay.
I do think, just in the future, it is important, we're here for representation from the constituents. And a lot of times, they will look and watch what's happening on this council meeting. And then, oh, I got an interest there at the next council meeting, they're there. If you don't give them that opportunity, I don't oftentimes have a problem with the third reading, but I really think it is important, unless we're doing housekeeping, like stop signs and something like that. But something like zoning or things like this, I think it's important that we have at least 2 readings, guys. I truly do.
One other technical question, it sounds like at some point in the history, there was a special declaration that this area was blighted. Do you have to have a special resolution to declare it unblighted?
Or will it still be blighted?
Well, keep in proper context, the blighted determination was an important aspect of the urban renewal area on it. So to answer the question, unless, it's probably a Christine question, do you have to unblight an area on it? But for the urban renewal area, when that was established, that was an important consideration, was the declaration of blight for that. So I would say for the foreseeable future, while we're hoping to unblight the area, if we could keep that in place, we would sure appreciate it for the urban renewal district, so.
It's been redeveloped.
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of the blight is to work on redevelopment.
Addressing process. I mean, this creates a pinch point. It's moved the envelope as far as what we consider to be architecture in the community, and quite frankly, CDC is behind. They've got catch-up to do.
Which, on that process, is that comes as a recommendation from the CDC to change, or could that be something, or should that be something that would come from this body, or, because I think they realize it themselves, I truly do, we heard that tonight.
Yeah, what I would say is that typically, let's just talk about zoning changes in general. They could either be initiated at our boards on it, such as CDC, Planning and Zoning, or the Board of Adjustment, or it can come from the City Council. Either way, the initiative could be at either governing body, or from the City Council or the boards on it. So again, if that's something council would like to talk about for a future policy and planning item, we'd be more than happy to.
I wouldn't mind seeing it on, at some point, I know we got a lot of things on the agenda, but some point, and I think they would be open to it, and I think it's maybe time. Or we're gonna have a lot more of this, and then ultimately, because I am concerned about this setting a precedence, and you get a big hitter come into town. Well, and.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure I address the precedents. If you look at everything that's going on in this urban renewal area, go back to 2018, big yellow house, Webster School, blighted area. I can't think of another area in town that's been blighted, and then one of the goals that we had, we stated we wanted to cure the blight through economic development. So when you look at this area, it's different than any other area that we have in town.
But Michael, we do have areas in town that could be declared blighted areas.
Oh, yes,
So I think.
And I would agree with, I would agree with that, but more my point is, council member, and I don't mean to be disrespectful.
No.
There's a process that you have to go through, or you should go through, to declare an area blight.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, that determination was not a one council meeting determination. There's a thick consultant report at City Hall on the blighted area and how it meets the standards under state code.
I agree.
And so I would say if we're going to do this in the future, that same due process, that same process should be followed in considering the blight. So
I agree.
So from a precedent standpoint, I want to make sure that's firmly understood. And this ordinance, the design standards, is very similar to what was approved in 2018. 2015 with the South Main development.
I would actually like to set a precedent of developing great projects like this, so I'm all for setting.
Yeah,
a precedent.
again, I think.
Well, but I don't wanna forego the CDC.
Sure.
That's my point. I'm not against the design, don't get me wrong. It's the process that we're talking about here, David.
And just to answer that, I don't, the next time this, if it ever happens, if we have a blighted area, we have a developer that comes forth at that time and says, here's my grant, I want to build this here. They may not want to bypass CDC. They might say, here's our design, let's get it. In this particular case, a developer comes forward and says, here's what we want to build on this area, on this section of town. It's a negotiation between the developer and the city, and we cannot unilaterally change the agreed upon items without going back to the developer and getting a new agreement. And that didn't happen here. It's not, this may never happen again. It might happen again. We don't know that. But every case will be case by case.
We did indeed, no matter what anybody says, we opened that door a little bit.
Well, I don't agree. I don't agree.
You know, you said they may or may not, but they have that option not to.
And we have the option as the other side of the agreement to not agree to it.
I agree.
We don't have to agree to anything.
I agree.
So I don't see, I don't fear the precedent here at all. I think this is a unique enough situation, and the way the whole thing transpired, I
You know
don't
what,
see.
Mayor? I hope you're correct.
Maybe neither one of us will live long enough to ever see it again, but.
Well, I certainly hope we do. I have to put this out here.
Okay.
I think this is just the beginning. I agree with Dave. And as representative of Ward 1, we're going to travel around that corner, and you are going to see urban blight, and you're going to see the most convoluted lot lines. And we, as a governing body, we need to look at that, and we need to understand that 2 and 2 doesn't always equal 4. And how do we take that lot, and how do we redevelop? And I think a lot of us fear urban development because we've never been a part of it. Urban development, each project is different. Each project can be very, very gritty. But at the end of the day, this is how we're going to grow our community in certain areas. It is the only way we're going to be able to grow our community. So I, for one, I just want to hang on for the ride. And at times I'd like to drive the train because I think this is what we've been waiting for. This is the renaissance that our community needs. And if you just take a few hours of your time privately as council members and you study other urban development projects in other communities, it really comes to light the special circumstances and special concessions that are given to each unique project.
Okay, I think we'll move to a vote here. So, we've had a lot of discussion, just so we know what we're doing here. All in favor of adopting ordinance number 990, please say yes, and opposed no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Score,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Reindeerhorst,
Yes.
Amstrad,
Yes.
Skiba.
Yes.
Motion passed. Okay, moving on to, let's see, we're up to our abstract of bills number 2077. I have a motion for approval.
Move to approve and issue warrants.
Reindeerhorst? DeYoung, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Reindeerhorst,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Amstrad,
Yes.
Skiba,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Score.
Motion passed. Any council members have any other business needs to be addressed tonight? Okay, any members of the public have any business other than our agenda items that you'd like us to consider tonight? Okay, so do I have a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Iowa Code Chapter 21.5, Paragraph 1C to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in that litigation?
Move to enter closed session.
DeYoung? Hopkins? All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ford?
Yes.
Reindeerhorst?
Yes.
Anstra?
Yes.
Ebout?
Yes.
Motion passed. So anyone listening on the phone while we are in closed sessions, you can remain on the line, and when we're done with the closed session, the audio for the meeting will resume. Okay, we're back. Any council member have a motion to make regarding closed session? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
DeYoung, Hopkins, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung?
Yes.
Hopkins?
Yes.
Ford?
Yes.
Reindeerhorst?
Yes.
Anstra?
Yes.
Ebout?
Yes.
Motion passed. So we are adjourned. We will move immediately into our planning session. As soon as I find it here. So let's see, which one's first?
Mayor, I'm going to let you, feel free to.
Let's, can we do the alley first?
Yes,
Because these
yes,
guys
sir.
have been waiting
Yeah.
patiently
Yes,
for
sir. Yes,
a
sir.
long time.
Yes, sir.
I don't
Can I make
think,
a correction to that? We haven't been waiting patiently. Impatiently.
All righty.
so yeah, if you want to
Yes, sir.
lead us,
You
get
bet,
us started.
you bet. All righty. As Mayor DeWart stated, the purpose of tonight's policy and planning discussion is to discuss a request for Mr. Bob Zalster, and I would say also associated, Mr. Zalster, it's been my impression, is the leader of the property owner group that's making this request. But specifically, this request is to obtain ownership and pave a private drive that's north of the 700 block of Washington Street. We'll have a map of the general area of this request later on in the presentation. This request, we've been working on it for some time. Mr. Zalster, originally the request came to the City of Pella on February 4th of 2020. Now, as a part of the request, what Mr. Zalster stated is part of the reason that the request was made to the City Council is there was some uncertainty on the alley that we're talking about tonight as far as the ultimate ownership of the alley that had precluded the property owner group from making the repairs that were being requested to the City Council. Now, what we have found on this and what we're saying is that what we found is back in 1893 there was a deeded right-of-way deed that was given to the abutting property owners for this alley. Now, does that necessarily resolve the property owner concerns on ownership issues? That's probably a legal question that needs to be answered, but it appears that there was some sort of deeded transaction that was identified as a right-of-way deed, and depending on your legal interpretation of matters, it's somewhat dated, but it was referred to as a right-of-way deed. So at least we wanted to share that information that came to the city's attention. Mandy, let's go ahead, please. Now, as far as the alley is concerned, it's our general understanding. You look at here is Washington Street up here. The alley is this general highlighted here area here. The Wells Fargo Bank property is located right down here. Tulip City Agency is over here on it, in the general area. When you look at the alleyway project and the private drive that we have, just so everyone understands, this is a private drive, which means it serves as a private drive to the abutting property owners and other residential property owners that use it to access Main Street on here. What the city attorney has stated, in order for the city council to take the project and take ownership of it, it can no longer stay as a private drive. It has to be determined public right-of-way, which means anybody can go back there. That's one of the important things under our requirements that the city attorney has stated. So it can no longer just be a private drive. It has to be available to the public. Now, one of the key things to keep in mind, the reason this is because there's some issues under Iowa code. If the city were to take this over and keep it a private drive where it would only be able to access by these folks here, there's some questions on what is the public purpose of the matter. So the attorney, our city attorney, believes that this needs to be designated as public right-of-way on it. Now, when we've looked at these traditionally on our review of it, and I'm going to preface my comments that when we met in February 4th, 2020, staff's instructions.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
You said public right-of-way?
Yes.
As opposed to, it says public access, is that just words, or does
That's
that?
probably just words, but it's
Okay.
public right-of-way. What we're meaning is it's an alley, same thing as Main Street, can be used by the public. Right now, it's a private drive.
So
So
we would own that now, so it becomes city property. It's not just a right-of-way, it's actual city property.
it's city right-of-way, but the general public could be back there on there, and they could not have their access blocked. Just to be very clear, it's publicly owned at that point. It's not privately owned on the matter. Now, in looking at this, I'm going to preface my comments with the property owners here. We were instructed to look at options for this matter. And I'm going to go over two scenarios. One is how we traditionally look at items that people suggest for private drives, wanting the city to take over ownership of it. Generally, the first thing that we do is we look at the public transportation system and what is the benefit to the public. We're going to cover that later on in Public Works comments that we have on it. The second item that we look at is the city code. When you look at people wanting to dedicate streets to the City of Pella and the City of Pella own it and maintain it, we look at what is the city's infrastructure standards and what does that requirement have. And where that likely plays out is when you have new subdivisions, developer comes in, installs the streets. Generally, what's been required of developers is you install those streets, you install the public infrastructure to the city infrastructure requirements. Once we have that and it meets all city requirements, at that time, the city council assumes ownership of the street, but only after it's been upgraded to city standards. So when we look at these things, traditionally, we look at is what is the general public's benefit to the private drive, and what is the condition of the private drive? Does it meet public infrastructure standards? That's been the traditional approach. Now, in this case, on it, traditionally, for similar requests, the city has required developers to upgrade streets or private drives to city standards before the city's accepted the ownership of the infrastructure. In this case, what the property owners and what was presented on February 4th were presenting is they're requesting the city to take ownership of it, of an existing gravel private drive that does not meet city standards, and they're requesting the city to upgrade it. Those were the marching orders, and it seemed at the time council wanted us to look at options. What I'm covering in the first scenario is the traditional approach that we'll have, and then we'll also cover into looking at the options approach that we were instructed to do. So Mandy, let's go ahead, please. Now, as far as the public benefit to this matter and the input that we received from staff, but these are just general staff, it's listed as Public Works, but these are issues that we've identified on it. When you look at this alley is essentially a dead-end alley. If we were to look at our public transportation plan on it, it's questionable on a dead-end alley what the public benefit would be on that from our standpoint in looking at this matter from a public transportation standpoint. The second item that was noted by our crews is if we take ownership of it and we have to maintain ownership of it, there are some concerns of our Public Works Department as it applies to snow removal in this particular case, and they're listed, and were listed in your packet. There's also concerns about backing out onto a busy street, being forced to back out on the busy street because the alley does not contain a necessary big enough area for our vehicles to turn around in. And that was viewed as a safety concern by the Public Works Department. Denny, I know that was a 50,000-foot elevation overview. Is there anything else that Public Works?
That's basically it. We just see it as an area that probably needs cleaned with a skid loader. We do not remove snow with a skid loader. You know, they're a great tool for a 2-3 hour operation like private people, but you don't do 12-hour shifts with a skid loader. You know, you don't see behind you, so we don't even use it. And when it's dead-ended like this, that's really the only piece of equipment, you know, we would have to do that. You know, that goes back to 100 years ago, alleys by design, they were through. You know, whether it's a pickup or a one-tonner, takes us 2 to 5 minutes from one end to the other with minor windrows on both sides or on one, depending on where the garages might be over the years. But it's not any turnaround, backing up, piling snow or hauling snow away, which this one would, you know, any dead end would cause.
So on that, that's our traditional approach that we would look at. We're questioning what the public transportation system is And there's also concerns because the infrastructure isn't there that would force our vehicles to back out, use skid loaders for snow removal. So there's some concerns at the Public Works Department. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Okay, I believe I just stated all that. Now, based on our traditional approach, our recommendation here this evening would be to require, if the city council wants to accept this project, would be to require the property owners to upgrade the alley to public infrastructure standards. It means put in the necessary turn radius and bring it up to standards before you dedicate it to the City of Pella. Once that's done, we can consider ownership of it. That would be our recommendation under the traditional approach. However, our instructions on February 4th, it seemed like there was interest in council for other issues outside of public transportation that you guys wanted us to look into. And so I want to make very clear, if we looked at this traditionally how we've looked at others, that's exactly what our recommendation would be to you. Require the property owners to upgrade the private drive to city standards before we accept the infrastructure, because it addresses what Denny's concerns are back there. However, on February 4th, you guys asked us to look into options because there appear to be other issues why the city may want to accept this private drive. And I want to give a history on what we've done and what we're recommending under what I call option B under that case, if there's other reasons why you'd want to accept this outside of the public transportation system. So, Mandy, let's go ahead. One of the things we think, if we're doing it for any reason outside of the public transportation, the benefit to the public transportation, what we're going to recommend is that we develop a policy first. And the reason for this is there's at least 30 known private drives within our community, and they're highlighted in red, and there's probably more out there. The truth of the matter is if you accept one of these, and regardless whether it's similar or not in our eyes, and the property owners that are on these private drives, it looks very similar from their standpoint. And it's never an issue till you tell somebody no after you've told someone previously yes on an issue. So what we're saying is if we're doing it for some reason other than what we've traditionally evaluated, what is the benefit to the public transportation system, and two, what are the infrastructure levers? If we're doing it for something else, we need to develop a policy that addresses those situations before we accept it, because it could have policy indications. In 2007, we put in the council packet communication that we had with the Skyline Drive property owners. Mark and Bruce that were on the council, you know how many meetings that took with those property owners on this matter. And that was not something that was just a one meeting, that was several meetings on the matter. Same, very similar issues that happened in 2007. So from our standpoint, we feel it's important to have the policy first if we're doing something outside of what is the public benefit to the transportation system. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, in looking at this, we went in and we looked at the policy issue, and it seemed like council wanted to look at options. So one of our thoughts is we worked with the property owners, and what we had thought is, well, if we look at it and said if council wants to accept it for other reasons, it's close to the downtown, pedestrians may use it during tulip time, whatever the reasons may be, we at least need to take an effort towards working towards the policy issues. What we proposed, and I will admit I'm going to preface the comments, and as I sat and thought a long time, worked with the city attorney, we gave out an agreement that was basically a non-negotiable agreement from our standpoint that tried to address the policy issues. Specifically, when you look at this ownership issue, we're saying in 1893 there appeared to be a right-of-way deed to the property owners. It was unclear what the ownership issue is. There may be more issues. So in thinking about it, what a developer does is when they give property to the City of Pella, there's generally not an ownership issue at hand. That legal cost to get that to that point in time is the developer's responsibility. So what we proposed is that the property owners would reimburse the city for all legal fees for researching title, making sure that we had clear title, getting that whatever we needed from them to be able to transfer it to the city. That was the first non-negotiable item. The second item that we had, and Christine, if she was here, she could talk about item number 2 as opposed to the warranty deed and why that was important. My sense is with the warranty deed, why that was important was if you're going to invest and pave and make an investment that's going to cost several thousands of dollars for the general public, we want to make sure we don't have any title issues, and that was what was suggested was the warranty deed from the city attorney. The third item that we had is what our thoughts were is if we're going to accept it and not require the property owners to bring it up to city standards before accepting, we ought to at least talk about in the future, say if 10 years down the road, say if it was just a gravel road in the immediate future, and 10 years from now council decided to improve it, What we wanted to have in there was a petition and waiver system signed by the property owner saying if council decided to assess for any portion of this project, we wouldn't get protests from the property owners that we took the alley over. That was the other non-negotiable item from our standpoint on the matter. When we sent this out to the property owners, and I'm not disparaging their position on the matter, it was just something I want to preface. It was an item to address the policy issues because we were in somewhat uncharted territory. They declined those options on it. And from our standpoint at that time, we didn't think it was beneficial to continue negotiations along those routes because it appeared that we were at loggerheads. We were trying to address the policy issues and looking at it. I could also tell you, after that occurred, what we tried to do is we went to other property owners along that stretch, and this one deals with the old Wells Fargo building. We also looked at, well, what if that Wells Fargo parking lot was available to the public on it, and it was associated with this alleyway? That may be some public use that could help in the matter. We looked at it, we had initial conversations with the Historical Society on it, and what was ultimately thought is there wasn't enough parking spaces to justify, and we'd be better off just coming back to council and seeing where we stand. And that's kind of where we are tonight, but that's at least the efforts that we had on the matter. Now, as far as option B, so once again, this is the option. If we want to look at it and get away from pure just benefit to the public transportation system, we're going to consider other options. What we would suggest for the policy, let's go to slide number 45, Andy, is we would recommend the council adopts a policy, and the policy should hit on these major points. And, you know, again, if there's 30 other of these private drives in the city of Pella, from a property owner standpoint, if the city council does something for one property owner and tells someone no, they look similar from the property owner standpoint. If we're going to have something outside of the benefit to the public transportation system as our sole judge on the matter, what we ought to have in the policy is the findings required for accepting private drives. And again, I'm not here to suggest what those should be. That's something that's a policy development that we should go under. We should also address what is the infrastructure standards and requirements for private drives to be accepted by the city of Pella at the time. And we should also address what the financial responsibility is for the abutting and adjacent property owners in the policy before we do anything. And also, we ought to address this whole issue of the legal fees and deeds on the property as well in the policy. Again, I don't have specific recommendations on the policy, but it's more just a general philosophical issue. There's at least 30 known private drives in the community. If we're doing acceptance of private drives, anything other than the benefit to the public transportation system, we ought to have a policy that spells out our conditions for accepting these private drives. So, Mr. Mayor, I know that was a lot to go over. Be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor or council may have on what's happened in the past and where we are leading up to this point. But I want to emphasize, we've tried to, and I would say Bob and his group have been very good to work from my perspective. They were not difficult on matters, but these are just truly issues that are kind of uncharted, specifically when you start getting away from the public benefit to the transportation system in ways that we've traditionally looked at items. So with that, I'd like to be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor or council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So let's start with council questions. Bob's here, group's here, so certainly any questions we would have of them, they would answer. And I will give you
on the phone too.
I will give you plenty of time to rebuttal or whatever you want to call it. But I want to see if council has questions, comments. You know, obviously this is a planning session, and so Mike is looking for guidance as to where the council wishes to go with this particular item. So that's our ultimate goal, is to give direction to staff as to how we want to move forward with this.
I just have one question on the existing policy that we have. If we do an assessment and the right to appeal the assessment or to on the sidewalk or anything, you know, you're eliminating that right here. Is that right normally in other parts of the city? If the city wants to do something and assess the property owners, and is there an appeal process there with those that the general citizen has, but these property owners would not have?
Yeah, that's probably a legal question for Christine. I can tell you what's been done, that I'm aware of one issue, and that would have been in the Shady Brook subdivision. When that was approved, that was on an existing gravel road, 218th Avenue. And I believe at the time, and Denny helped me out if I'm not, but one of the things, the requirement of the developer was they signed waiver and assessments for an assessment project on 218th Avenue.
Petition and waiver.
Yeah, and that was similar to this. It doesn't mean that the city's going to assess it. It just means if they do, they're waiving the right to protest a future assessment on it. And that's the purpose of the matter. But that's been done before on the Shady Brook subdivision. Obviously, we're not assessing anybody for the upgrade of 218th Avenue, but we had that ability to, and as it applies to Shady Brook, it's my understanding they've waived the right to protest that. That was one example. I believe it's also been done on a Park Lane subdivision that's currently a gravel road for Francis Sheebout, I believe is the pronunciation. I can remember that assessment and waiver was done on that as it applies to Park Lane on it. So it has been done in the fact previously on developments on this, but it's not necessarily the city taking over ownership. It was if it was an assessment project. Now, I don't know whether that waiver, and that's probably a question for the city attorney, we'd be more than happy to answer that question.
Yeah, my thought was this any more stringent than the average, that if you're gonna put gold-plated sidewalk along 1336 Orchard Drive where I live, do I have the right to appeal that?
Yes.
Or are you forced?
Yeah, you have the right to appeal an assessment project to the city council under it. And what our thoughts were, the reason why we proposed this is that what I think Denny and I are struggling with on these private drives is if you just look at a developer from a standpoint, what they're being told when they come in and develop, and we deal with this fairly routinely. I want to develop parcels XYZ, and I want to dedicate the infrastructure and have the city own and maintain the infrastructure. What do I need to do? They're told up front, you pay for all the cost, and then you dedicate it to the City of Pella. So when we look at private drives, we're struggling with other aspects in the code. If you had a new subdivision, what would the standards be? And so the assessment and waiver that was proposed here was a way to say, kind of move the can down the road as far as who pays for the upgrade. It gives the ability for the city council to make that determination without having protest on the assessment. Both parties would agree, and that was our way of proposing that.
My thought was more that if this was something that the city wanted to do, and I can see that's a big if, that there's a negotiated agreement up front, who's paying for what right now, but hamstringing something for 50 years down the road if there has to be an upgrade or not, that seemed a little harsh to me when I read that.
Well, it may be, but I want to put it in proper context. When we were going at this time, with the private drive, we were coming off, there appeared to be some interest in actually accepting this private drive. We looked at it the way we traditionally review this is what is the benefit to the public transportation system. We just heard from Denny and his staff, it's questionable. And so from our standpoint, we were looking at how could we justify, or if the city council wanted to do this, what makes this different. And so that was one way without negotiating the financial responsibilities. That could have been the second approach. And depending on what side of the fence you're on, that may be well viewed as that might have been a harsher approach as well, as far as negotiating the actual financial responsibility. Maybe that's the approach we should have taken. That's a fair criticism on that.
That's an observation more.
Yeah, maybe that was an acceptable method, but I guess what you're hearing me say, really there's two items. There was the whole issue on basically the financial responsibility for this. There's the issue on the warranty deed on the matter. And Mandy, if you can go back to my third issue at the time. It's been a long night, I'm sorry. Reimburse. And the third item is what would a developer be required for legal fees? If you're looking at this, I think Christine said at the time she estimated her firm's legal fees would be between $2,000 to $5,000 just in getting the conveyance of the property to the city was their estimation. Might have been more. That seems to be what I recommend. A developer would be paying that on it. So that was the other issue on it. And that's what we're trying to address, those 3 points, without any guidance from the city council. And that's really what we're here to talk tonight about.
I think those are all good points to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to me the first thing that we have to do is to determine, is there a public benefit? Under the traditional definition of public transportation, I think we all see no. For driving through and things like that. It's the downtown issues, that kind of stuff is really going to be, I think, play the role of, is this something that the public is going to enjoy or just these folks going to enjoy? That's really what we have to determine, and that's, you know, historical village folks and convention and visitors bureau. I think for me, that's what would make a big difference on if they think this is important or not.
You know, another way I've heard attorneys, I might not get exactly correct, on petition and waiver, what's the document all about? It's really those people in a given area petitioning the city and acknowledging, we have this project, we have this street that needs paved, we want the city to pave it in a reasonable amount of time. Reasonable, maybe 3 years, 10 years, 20 years, but whenever the city gets ready to, we want you to do that project. And the waiver is, we waive part of our rights that we know there'll be some assessment, a reasonable assessment. So that's what the petition waiver is.
Almost for a specific thing, not ongoing forever.
Yeah, and it's above and beyond the law.
Okay.
You always have the right to assess. The council can decide next meeting, hey, we're gonna assess this street, and this amount. You always have that right. This doesn't change it. It's just an additional notice that we know this project's out there. These people have agreed they want us to do that project, and the money's there available, and they're okay paying part of it.
Okay.
Well, that's 25% or 50, whatever's determined at a later date, which then goes through multiple public hearings. So there's all kinds of input on, you know, how much and that type of thing. I think that's what Christine was trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Denny, that was a very good explanation, so thank you. And that was the intent
Okay.
on it. The alternative would have been exactly what you proposed, Councilmember Anstra, just negotiate out who's paying for what financially with them. But my impression was, in thinking about that approach, that would have taken longer than what we proposed with the petition waiver. What we were really saying is we're going to determine that at a later date. And I would say this, the agreement came from me, so when I say these items are non-negotiable, well, that was me doing it, and I was hoping to have something to come back with you folks and say, this is what we took a stab at. So.
It seems like there's a few other, not even necessarily considering all the private drives, there's a few other gravel roads that would maybe be in line in front of this one, even if this was something we were going to consider. It's, I think, a ways down the list. Again, back to the public benefit, there's a lot more public benefit on a handful of other streets that we consider. The other thing, I'm maybe not particularly a big fan of the we are requesting, and don't hear this as me being combative or anything, but you know, so we're requesting the city of Pella establish its ownership of the alleyway, pave it, and then no parking, no turnaround space, and limited use. So we want this paved, and we want it nice, but we don't want anybody to use it as a public right of way. I'm overstating that.
May respond. We've never objected to having it be in a public right of way. We understood that was part of the game from day one. I don't know where the concept came from that we were going to have you pave it just for the private use of the neighbors. That was never on the table.
You guys didn't put together this we are requesting?
We put together requesting to pave it, but not that it be a private drive.
Oh, it just says here, the city of Pella add official signage to the alleyway showing no
Oh,
parking.
that's from a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
I think that was in the original petition that Mr. Zalster presented to the City Council in 2020, and we included it in your council packet, so it was submitted to the city, and the property owner group had to, and just to be clear, what the city attorney is stating is if you're going to accept it, it needs to be a public right-of-way available to the general public. And they've never, as far as I'm aware, I think they've realized it's a public right-of-way, but I think they did make the request that the Councilmember Hopkins was originally on the matter.
That's been over a year ago.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, we're just sitting here talking. This is a Pandora's box. We don't know whether to open it or sit on the tree.
Well, my feeling is that I go back to '07. I mean, you know, they wanted us to take that, I think it was, I can't even think of the name of it, Skyline project. Well, you know, they sold those lots for 20 cents on the dollar from what a Pella lot was doing. And for us to come in there and try and make it suit up, it wasn't possible. Because, if you extended it out, the curb would be right in the front door. So, there's gotta be some skin into the game with the adjacent property owners and those that are petitioning, in my feeling. I like your approach there, Michael, and I'm okay with that. We can, I think, sit and discuss and hone it some, but, just to come and say, well, the city, you have to. The Historical Society, isn't the bank, that property's to the Historical Society, right? They really are the beneficiaries, huge beneficiaries.
Well, there's probably people that use that routinely. There's half a dozen people that'll use it on that east-west segment. It is the only way to get to the north-south segment, which we haven't talked about. And there's another 8 or 10 people down there. It's the only way they can use that back access.
Yep.
So as an example, on the Lautenbach Trust, the only way you can get to the garage for that property is use this alleyway and then the other alleyway, which has very different heritage than this one does. It's a much newer alleyway and even more ambiguous ownership. So even, but if I may respond, Bruce, to the situation you talked on Skyline Drive, that did not have the problem of ownership ambiguity. It has a clear owner, they've been paying taxes on it dutifully every year. This property has never had that. We have a deeded right-of-way. We don't own the dirt.
I know this one is unique, Bob, but
It's
from
really quite distinct.
from our point of view, everybody that comes before us, it all looks the same to them. And that Skyline Drive, that was the same thing, we pay city taxes, why don't you? So we need to be very careful, and I like Mike's approach in that we have to have some policy in place, or we're gonna have 30 different people coming in here wanting their alley, their private drive, their whatever, to be city property.
And I'll be happy to cooperate with you in any way you can on a policy. What I'm just trying to get this thing over the goal line somehow, some way. And if we have to do a policy first, but it would seem to me that for a policy, that there's a few distinctions. That one, it may not be in the central business district, but it is adjacent to. So you got this little alleyway, it's a little mini blighted area. You guys got revved up on blights a little bit ago. Well, that's what this is. It is just a bit of a public eyesore. Right adjacent to to the central business district. So I think that makes it pretty distinctive. And, we've had some lay people argue that a right-of-way is equivalent to owning the dirt.
No, that's not true, Bob.
Well,
That's not what we're arguing.
Well,
I'd be glad to speak to that a little bit.
well, but then it just says for the property owners to, quote, do the improvement. We don't own anything.
Yes, you do.
What do we own?
You own an equitable interest in ingress egress to your properties that was deeded to you by right-of-way deed in 1893. So if there's been nobody paying taxes, and you have a good attorney, the 6 of you or 7 of you could take over also fee title.
Yes, we can.
Because in Iowa, essentially, when you have an ingress egress easement, you have a right to have an all-weather surface road, so you can ingress egress. That could be gravel, pavement, or asphalt. So you have a right to go do that today by the document you have.
With all due respect, by the way, we've had 2 attorneys involved directly in the property ownership group, Jim Marple and Vince Paul. Or Vince Klein, I'm sorry.
You need an attorney that deals in real estate every day, and that's all they do, and I think you'll clear
Well, I think
things up.
Vince Klein does a lot of real estate work, but be that as it may, I'm happy enough getting that resolved in the property owner. We said we will, develop an abstract for the property. There's never been one that we can find. We'll develop an abstract, we'll do that at our expense. In terms of giving a warranty deed, again, we're happy enough to forfeit our rights with whatever seems to be a suitable statement of that. We've been clear with that from all along. In terms of warranting that, said all of a sudden it gets a little more complicated because you're going to have complicated common law issues dealing with the north-south property owners who use that by virtue of having been there for close to 100 years. That alleyway was created, I think, in 1927. So Christine Stone, about March of last year, I think, sent a letter. It would be a relatively straightforward legal process for the city to take ownership. She outlined it in a letter to the city. That looked a lot more simple and a lot more straightforward than a group of property owners trying to do it. It's simply because the Iowa Code apparently calls out a way that you can do it for the city and you're a special entity. For a group of homeowners to do it, it is possible.
She may be talking about just condemning it and clearing it.
Well,
But
she wrote the letter.
But as owners, you could get ownership.
Oh, I
You could get
know.
maybe never get to a warning deed.
What is
Because
that,
warning
what is a
deeds-
developer gonna think if a developer comes into town, Bob, and wants to put up something and develop an area? He pays for it all.
The first
It
thing-
is given over to the city.
Right. The first thing he pays for is the land. The first thing he pays for a development project.
Right.
But the issue that you have here that's so distinctive, the adjacent property owners, although we have right of passage, you do not own the dirt.
Fine, let's get beyond that. We'll take it if that's what it takes. We'll take the property.
That's what we're asking.
But,
That's what we're asking.
okay, no, but you want us to pave it and you want it brick, right?
We're suggesting.
What's different than that than a developer?
We're suggesting that it's in the city interest because of where it's at and because of the people that are using it. By the way, you keep an eye on that alleyway here over the next 4 or 5 weeks, and you'll probably see 50, maybe 100 people a day walking out of the east entrance of the Schulte Garden down there because it looks like it is a city-owned public alleyway getting from the Schulte Garden east entrance out to Main Street. It just gets a constant, steady stream of traffic. And so it's not because we give them permission or not give them permission. It just, that's what it looks like. There's a sidewalk, literally comes out of the east side of the Schulte Gardens, terminates at the end of the alley, going to, it's like the alley. And people just use it as, and assume it is a city alleyway. And that's what we're saying, you know, it sort of looks like one, feels like one, maybe we ought to just declare one.
That's where I think this is like the PUD that we talked about earlier, a special circumstance. I like that idea that you talked about setting a policy. No policy is ever going to work for this one because all the other ones were developed as private drives for that very purpose. I would dare venture. This just happened to occur in 1893.
Yeah, I guess, I'd be hesitant. I wasn't sure why it was deeded private, a private right-of-way deed as opposed to a public alley. I don't know the circumstances on it. And I would agree, you're not going to have a policy that hits everything, but the key question is, the recommendation for the policy is, there's 30 others of these, and if you tell somebody no, you need to at least have justification for why you're telling someone no.
Well,
And that's more of the issue.
Well, I think we've had kind of the same discussion twice now tonight. And I've stated that when it came to the PUD with Market, and I felt like there was enough circumstances around that project that it made it easily justified to someone else that comes in and wants to say, you did it for them. I think that was the unique enough project that when we talk about the blight, and we talk about the different circumstances there. So for me, we have to identify some real solid circumstances to make this one different than the other 29, to me. Because you are correct, if we take this over, you're gonna have other people that are gonna come and say, take it over. So you have to have a solid argument as to why. So, Bob, you need to tell me, convince me, why this is unique enough that the next guy that comes, I can say, well, they had these set of circumstances here, and you don't have those, so we said yes to them.
Let me give you three really distinctions.
Okay.
One, almost in the central business district. Well, it's arguable whether it is or isn't, depends which map you look at. Either way, it's adjacent to it. Okay, the second one is, it is very ambiguous on ownership, who owns the dirt. Okay, I mean, you can do it, there are hard ways to get that ownership established and relatively easy ways, and we're voting for the easy way. One of the other things we haven't pointed out is every other business area in the central business district, the backs of the alleys have service, or back of the businesses have service alleys. This is the only one where it's a private service alley. You can look at the alleys that go behind, Broadway, behind Main Street, behind Franklin. They all have alleys maintained at city expense, paved at city expense. These are the only ones that don't.
What about behind the bike shop and?
There are alleyways back there. There's an east-west alleyway at Eastport.
Those are part of it.
Get right to do a project on it.
That's all.
And in terms of snow removal, I mean, I understand the problem with snow removal. There's two observations I make. This alleyway and right-of-way is relatively wide compared to some of the ones you deal with. With Eastport, at the narrow point, it's barely 10 feet wide to get through.
That's the
Right.
problem, it's too wide. We can't make the one path. You touched on an excellent idea, well, I'm gonna say it now, I'm gonna use a four-letter word with it. Parking, an L-shaped alley, we wouldn't have any problem, it'd be through,
Right.
and let's put a public restroom there. There's a four-letter word.
It's not on the square, so it may not be
It's not on the
bad.
square.
The other thing I would say, in terms of just the public benefit, all the problems that he's described, it's going on every winter anyway. Somebody's backing out into Main Street, somebody's hauling the snow off, and I understand you don't want to have people spending a lot of time in the end loader. Literally after every significant snowstorm, a few hundred feet away, there's an end loader running, doing exactly this kind of work. The city's street department is in the business of doing this, and it seems to me that it's because it's in sort of a little ugly alleyway right in the central business district and ambiguous ownership. The other thing is that a couple of the property owners have already invested an enormous amount of money on making it look a lot better in an area that's adjacent to a private park, that being Schulte Garden. And in part, one of the owners, I think, went out of the way, did a fancy bit of work on his garage, just so that it would be a better, more appealing area for people coming out of that Schulte Garden. It would seem to me that because of what's already gone there, it'd be in the city interest to at least put this on the future plan of where they would do some of the improvements. As an example, in streetscape, it is a natural ally to some of what you're trying to get done on streetscape, because it is, it probably gets as much foot traffic almost as Oostport does during the holidays.
Car traffic. There's a lot of car traffic through there too.
Where do cars go?
It's a quasi-public alley now. People use it as a public alley.
To give you an example of people, okay, school lets out, stop signs, got a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
They're gonna save their time. They're gonna go through that alley and through the bank. And I've even seen them where they went east. Now, to me, that don't make any sense at all.
That's called impatience. Yeah.
And the Wells Fargo ATM, people come in there and use it and drive out there, and the Schulte people, which is fine, work out of there, they park their car there, they drive up and down through there, and then there's a lot of cars, a lot more cars than I think any of you guys realize go up and down that alley.
Well, so Bob, your 3 points you made, only one of them, I think I could have a discussion with somebody else.
Please, Don, I gave you a pretty good shot.
No, I'm the only one that I think that if someone else came to me and said, hey, you took that over. Number one, the ownership issue, that's why I asked the question. To me, a right-of-way is different than an ownership, but in reality, legally, it's probably really not. I mean, in my mind, it's different. That's why I was wondering, if you have a right-of-way, that's as good as ownership for the most part.
When you go get a building permit, it isn't.
Yeah.
It is to the two major houses, that's their only access.
Yeah.
And I'm confident somebody like Vince, when they're doing a legal opinion for those two houses, he's thrilled that 1893 document's in there, because that's the access to that house.
But anyway, the point you make about it being downtown, to me, that differentiates it a lot from some of the other ones that exist. You know, the fact that you prettied up the back alley and stuff, yeah, everybody can tell me they prettied up, but the downtown part of it, I think, is, to me, is a reasonable discussion to have with somebody, so.
If it's being already used as a access exit from Skalty Gardens, I like the idea of cleaning it up and running with that, make it a passageway. Put up a sign, lead people down to Sunken Gardens from there, or whatever.
And
Yeah, so
and a public
potential.
restroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, a potential to make it a pedestrian.
You might turn your garage into a public restroom.
The potential to make it a.
Jim, I think maybe on the phone, you can ask him what he wants to do with his.
Hey, Jim.
The prospect of making it a pedestrian way, though, does seem a very reasonable use of it, because, yes, you do have, I'm sure there, and especially with the Historical Society taking over the bank and all of that, the potential for a lot of pedestrian traffic.
Do we know what the Historical Society's long-term plan is for that bank?
It would probably be, when I could share
And, you
with.
know, everybody's looking at you.
What's that?
At this point, there isn't a long-term.
Well, but I think that
Idea.
plays a very integral part in what happens to that alley. And just, you know, for us, I don't know, if we're concerned about that area being close to town and being close to the center of the community, what the Historical Society does is very important, I think. So maybe when that plan happens, we can partner with. I'd be happy to support that. But just for us to throw an alley in, and who knows what they're gonna do. I mean, can we incorporate something? I know public, that is, like Denny says, been a four-letter word, public restrooms. Wouldn't be a bad spot. I don't know.
I like the idea of the pedestrian thing, because then Jeanette's department cleans the snow.
They just go down the street, they just go down the street from the bowling
Because these
green.
folks, that's their only in and out.
Absolutely.
So it's gotta be more than just a pedestrian causeway.
Your snow removal thing, snow piles up on the north side, they pile of snow on the north side of the fence between the Wells Fargo parking lot and what people use. So that's,
We get windrows up against garage doors all the time, and get screamed at.
but there's no garage doors next to that fence any. They push the snow to the west
Yeah,
and pile it up by the fence.
But that's our point. In alleys, we don't back up, keep redoing, or we don't turn around with a skid loader and haul away alleys. You know, each alley takes us, what, 5 minutes?
But that might be part of agreement. Can we pile the snow up there if we would take it instead of haul it away, you know, on historical building? I was thinking, you know, we had another kind of controversial talk, and Lynn started out, make me want to like it.
I remember that night very well.
And that's where I think getting buy-in wouldn't be too far of a way for me to go if we could do something to promote that downtown business district and make that work. I worry about if we deal with this, I think we about have to deal with that north-south deal too.
Well, in some sense, I mean, the only thing the north-south, I've talked to all the property owners there, they don't see that north-south except for getting out, in and out, which they need the east-west segment. They're happy with that north-south segment the way it is.
Well, what if they change their mind?
Pardon me?
What if they change their mind?
There's two things that, one, the only thing they have in their favor, none of them own that 16-foot alleyway, nor do they have deeded right-of-ways to it, near as I can tell.
So nobody owns that either.
Nobody owns that one either.
So is there only one house is there only one property that can't get out other than that way? You mentioned.
Yeah, the little lot cottage.
But everybody else has access.
Right. Although
Over
they have
to
Broadway.
Ellen Weitenworth has a garage back there. The only way he can get to it, I think, with a vehicle is up and down the alleyway. And Doug Terpstra uses it as as an extra way in and out for his bed and breakfast business.
It appears both those alleys, 100 and some years ago, were severed, not split off and accounted for. They were in an original overall Schulte family, a whole big parcel. As they started selling pieces, all of a sudden they ended up severing it, and even somebody forgot they even owned it and didn't even charge them taxes. I think that's how we got to this point. It wasn't split. In other words, it wasn't an exception in a legal description. It would have been accept this, and then it would have been shown as a separate parcel they owned.
And it was arbitrarily called Lot 5 at some point.
Well, it was subdivided, that block 25, or block 17 was subdivided in 1917. And that was created as a separate lot. I mean,
With no owners.
with no owner. No owner, no taxes, and there's been at least some speculation among property owners in the area that at one time Schulte gave it informally to the city, they just never finished the paperwork for it. Whether or not there's any truth to that, who knows?
All right, so, anybody have any new ground to plow here? Is there any, typically when we have these, I feel like there's, as we discussed, that we're getting to a consensus. I'm not feeling that in this particular case.
I think
So
we're moving ahead a little bit.
So what do we wanna direct our staff?
I think Bruce's idea with the Historical Society, I think it's key that, if we're gonna treat this as a downtown development, it has to be in tandem with what those folks want to do with that property.
Maybe not just a standalone.
Right, I agree.
And our initial thought, dealing with the historical, how could that historical property have public benefit? So we talked to him initially, I talked to Chad Vandaloon about parking on there, but could have just as easily been public restrooms, whatever the case may be.
And that's when a lot of the staff concerns go away, because quite frankly, every one of those red splotches, people have tried to get us to do more for their private stuff. Whether it's give them a stop sign on a private drive, which we can't do, to help them fix a patch, to, so, and there's 2 or 3 of them I'm sure watching. Like, I'm not sure there's one on there I haven't dealt with in that kind of a context. It just,
So we as homeowners can put a private drive sign up ourselves because it's a private drive.
absolutely.
So we will alert people that think they can come down back and forth all the time.
You could probably put a fence up there.
Okay?
Then I'd have to get through it.
A remote control gate
Yeah.
that would swing in.
I don't think the police department can ticket people in a case like that. You can sign all you want, but they couldn't ticket.
Well, people just aren't aware of what that is.
Call the cops, come back and arrest you.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
If I could just say one
Yeah,
thing, Don,
yeah.
I think maybe a way forward, I think feeling council's not opposed to doing something with that alley, but we need a big picture. We need the Historical Society to step up to the plate. They're a huge beneficiary of it. If they can come, I think council is more than happy. And you and I had this conversation in her house back when. I think that's an important part, and we need the Historical Society integral in it also. I think council is open. We don't like that alley either.
I think that's the convince me part, to go back to Dave's statement. We need a package.
No.
We need to get that public benefit up there, and knowing the future plans of that property would probably be that piece that could push it over, because, we've got an answer.
I hear you. It just, because you've owned the property, what now, 2 years? Something like that, not quite that. It's just, because they've got, their plate just like yours is very full, and it's just gonna, it would seem to me that in this case, that the council with a pretty straightforward policy could distinguish this property from the other 31 on there, and take this step today, counting on that at some point there would be a collaborative effort with the Historical Society. When they get to the point they catch their breath enough, they actually develop a plan for that bank property.
I don't think that we can take a forward step today, because everything we do is normally based on statistics, it's based on numbers, it's based on policy. I mean, I don't know, it would concern me, I mean, to take a huge commitment to you without knowing the price tag of it.
And that's the problem we had with the agreement, that we'd have us sign up for all kinds of money. We had no idea what we were asked to sign up for.
Right, right.
For us to update an abstract, it's pretty straightforward, we're happy to do that. But the city didn't take ownership of it. If what Christine wrote in her letter of last spring, for them to take ownership, it's a relatively straightforward process. And it's an issue of securing the abandonment of rights of way. And I think I've forgotten, there was a couple other steps, but she outlined it in her letter. So at this point, for the city to move forward on that part, without a commitment to pay for anything else, only it keeps that option open. That would be a simple, straightforward step. Somebody's going to have to take the first step, either the Historical Society or the city. And the Historical Society, I don't know where you guys are at all when you're planning that. It doesn't feel very eminent.
That isn't on the radar at this point, but not saying it couldn't be.
The bank?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're using it as storage right now.
Well, I think from the city standpoint, the two issues that I see as immediate concerns if we move ahead right now and take it over. Number one is the maintenance part of it. Our staff has indicated that it would be a pain in the neck. And then the other is justification for taking that one and not the others, which, again, I think the downtown part of it makes that a pretty compelling discussion to have with anybody else that might come and say, well, you did it for them, you got to do it for us. So I think those are I think we kind of agree as a long-term, it's kind of attractive to think about it as a long-term in conjunction with Historical Society, and maybe we as a city could do something to prod Historical Society to consider something.
Historical Society, I mean, if they want to put public restrooms.
Yeah.
The city wants that. Okay, who's maintaining that?
Right,
Who's putting the cost of upgrading the building to do that?
Yeah.
And what happens with the parking?
Exactly.
Who has control of the parking?
There's not a lot of, I walked over there, there's not really a lot of parking there that would make it dampen parking.
Owns the alleyway right next to the building, between the bank and the building to the east. There's that little turnaround and alley.
That's the historical
society. The bank.
The historical society was right up to Jim Marble's building.
Okay.
So I think we got to get off of we got to move. It's way past my bedtime. We got two more issues to discuss. So I think what I hear is a long-term, I think we should have some discussion with, maybe the historic, involve the Historic Society, just, everything starts with an idea. Okay, so we can come up with some idea. Somebody can come up with some good idea we can have. The second question is, they're looking for a rather quick, get this done, get it to the city without any strings attached as to what we're going to do with it. Staff is concerned about if we do this before winter hits, then the only thing I've heard of snow removal is probably the biggest issue. So the question is, you want to push to do something quickly, or do you want to?
I don't think this is a quick decision.
Okay. What do we tell these guys?
Good luck.
No. Mayor, if I would recommend is we could have some policy that kind of outlines what we're hearing tonight. It's important to the city, that gives you guys discretion.
Okay.
I would recommend that regardless. I think that's important.
But there's many of them that are out there. I think it'd be good.
Yeah.
Really do.
And then too, to get the thing moving, it seems to me that we need to know Historical Society's plans. I've already had conversations with Chad Vandeloon on this. I could go back and touch base, or we could go back and touch base with Chad upon this, and those would be the two items that we could do.
I think if the Historical Society know that the city is willing to be helpful, at least if I'm reading the minds here, if we could best do that if we knew what they wanted to do, and then that would help us with the cost. If they say a brick paved alleyway is the best thing for the Historical Society there, then that helps us figure our costs and what we can or can't assess those folks who are also going to benefit from it.
Okay. Is that good enough?
I think so, sir.
You got direction. Thank you for waiting patiently. We'll try to keep you posted.
We'll check in with you guys.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Okay, so item 2 is the central business parking during the alley project. This should be quick. Okay, so
Mayor, if it's not too late, we can defer this item to, what I would first ask, if you want to talk about it, we could defer this to May 4th. If you're okay with just going as is and using the Second Christian Church parking lot, that's our plan. And then we just want to touch
I've got one issue with this, though. If I'm one of those people living in one of those apartments on the east side of the square there, I want a placard put in my windshield that lets me park on the street 24 hours a day.
Oh, living.
If you're an occupant of one of those apartments.
East side of, across from where the Oostpoort?
Yeah, basically the east part of the square in Phelps and all along there, those all have apartments above.
Oh, the apartments above the business of the square.
They're not gonna get ticketed if they park on the square.
Where are they? Oh, they.
We were gonna get there in
Okay.
this discussion if we wanna do it.
I-
We're gonna get to that deal just with that, because I wanna do it while the chief's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
It's healed enough.
gonna be up to him, and he carries the gun.
Sorry, I had to figure out what you were
Yeah,
talking
that's
about.
fine.
Now I get it.
Yeah.
Yes, because they're a lot where they park.
I'm not worried about them.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's worn out.
We'll get
Okay.
mentally prepared to do a presentation, Mayor. Basically, we're proposing to use Second Christian Reformed Church. Now, council, full disclosure, the church is going to come back and ask 610, their June 1st closing date. We'll have to talk about that. I think it's reasonable. We could probably work with them on accessing the rest of their parking. We have right now 50, an additional 30 slots on it. But based on our observations, we just wanted to check with you before we started this project and talk about parking. That if we're supposed to be looking into options, doing whatever, we do it before we start the project and we at least address the questions beforehand. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you folks.
Yeah, so I mean, the presentation was good, but now I hadn't thought about the residents of those apartments that use that lot overnight. So what's the solution? What's the solution?
Bear with me for about 5 minutes. And
Okay.
As you know, Mike mentions, we've got this already. We take this over in June, that's another 32. So if these people have to know where they're parking every day, business owners, people come to work, well, you're gonna have to walk a block and a half. But I tell you, last Monday, week ago Monday, I went up there between 1 and 1:30. Went to the lot, and we have 80-some parking stalls, included some of these sneaking back in the private stuff, and there was only like 46 cars. So most days, we're really only displacing a full 50, maybe 60 on a good day, but not 80. But then what I did, I went throughout the downtown area, and mostly in the red, of all our angled spaces and some parallel, and there was well over 200 parking spaces available in that time slot. Not counting this stuff that was available and this stuff to be added. And I come to the conclusion, and then I get back and I'm kicking around with Mandy, she reminds me of this map, and then we turn on the red and see all this 3-hour parking. And it goes back to Mark's concern, because we've got other people in apartments. I think we currently have too much 3-hour parking. I understand why it's there, but I think during a project like this and some in the future, we may need, at least during that period, relax some 3-hour parking. Whether that's 5 spots here and there and they're bagged, we put up special signs, no parking, or number 3, number 4, but that's a conclusion I had. There was well over 200, and I didn't even get lost in it here. I didn't even get down into these. That didn't even include these areas. And I was still at 200 within a block and a half of that who's poured out. You know, another ace in the hole, and we want to be careful promoting it. First Reformed Church, we have an agreement, and actually it's older than I've been here. We need to go back and read it, so. But there's 185 spots there. We maintained this parking lot with the idea we can use it for community service activities. I don't know if that agreement allows us 24/7, obviously not Sundays and Wednesday nights, but during the day we may be able to promote that too. But of course then that's 2.5 blocks from this current project.
If we're making people park 2 blocks away and there's 20 spots on the square available.
Because they're in the 3 hours.
Yeah.
So my proposal is we look at least during this project and others, where's 5 here, 5 there, that we can block off for people like Mark or some of, in this case, of that 46, that some of them can use.
Well, maybe Mark's idea of giving them something to put on their windshield that says they're a resident.
Yeah, I think the residents.
And then they can pick their
That's
spot.
an easy one. Then we don't even have to mess with
Then they can pick their
parking
spot.
spots, yeah.
Yeah. I've got a resident, new owners of the Strawberries buildings.
Yeah.
They live upstairs now.
Yeah.
He's got the same concern. He just built that nice garage in the back. And, yeah, my dreaded call in the morning is gonna be, well, you're gonna have to walk in and out and park somewhere else. You know, you'll have foot access the best we can, but not car to the back end.
It's gonna be a pain for those people
Oh,
for
yeah.
the summer.
I mean, we have to, I mean,
drive.
yeah,
It's no different than
People have to live with-
218th.
yeah.
It's gotta get worse for it.
Growing pains.
And 218th, there's people gonna be walking ways. And then what do they do on a rainy day? You still walk away.
Any estimate how many residents park overnight? Is that a 48 hour, or what is that?
The parking lot itself's 48 hours.
48?
Yeah. But I don't know, Chief, you got thoughts on?
Well, not to throw a monkey in the wrench, but
Go ahead.
recently, and I mean last week, there was not only some recent local court cases, but some developing court cases in Iowa that suggest that chalking a tire is violating your Fourth Amendment right. So I have put I've kind of put the kibosh on our marking tires and writing parking citations. And we've been on hold for, what, I'll say about a week now. And we've gotten one complaint from a business owner that said, hey, why don't you guys marking tires? We've got someone parking. Obviously, the complaint is having people park in their business spots to where they can't do business. So we're looking for an alternate solution to, the age-old marking the tire with a piece of chalk. It's not cheap, by the way, but I don't expect us to have that solution, honestly, anytime soon.
The alternatives are not cheap?
They are not.
The chalking is cheap.
The chalk is really cheap, but apparently that's violating Fourth Amendment rights. We would have to get a warrant to chalk a tire. Another discussion for a different day. But it does not prohibit us from using alternate means to enforce parking. The problem with that, to make a long story short, we've all been here a long time, is we obviously don't have the resources to sit officers out there and take pictures and wait for 3 hours. And so are we going to be, enforcing parking at this point? Not until we find a solution, or we identify a single offender and then we have to deal with that person somehow. But, if the council chooses to relax that and it's put out to the public, then maybe we don't get as many phone calls. We're kind of getting the water as far as the parking side.
Well, I think just having the extra spaces at the church will be fine. And I think the simplest thing would be to give a tag to the residents.
Or for not enforcing parking, it's kind of a moot point.
Yeah, but if somebody's car sits there for 2 days, somebody's gonna call you. So.
Did everybody get the email from the one person today? Is that what's prompting them?
Well, actually, she's moved out now, but one of my former employees was temporarily living above one of those businesses
I
there.
live
And
above, but you're
I warned her, I said, you don't want to be there this summers.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge when they're working. Snow removal.
So I'm assuming too that what you're bringing up, we really hesitate, we don't want that globally advertised either, because all of a sudden,
Yeah.
we'll have 25 habitual people in
Right.
people's front doors.
Mhm.
And that's where our parking shortage is, we don't have enough at people's front doors.
You know, honestly, we can do other techniques with chalk to mark around the tire, but
Drone pictures, send up a drone every hour.
it gets a little more complicated. So what I've instructed my staff to do is address parking issues as complaint arises, and then figure
Well,
out how to deal with it.
I would encourage you to try to find a solution that works, because I've pretty much been downtown for 40 years doing business, and it can be a real problem for people. And our business, our retail has grown downtown, so there's more need for open parking spots for shoppers. And the last thing we want is business owners to, and some of them don't think about it, sit in front of their own business for all day. So we've got to be able to enforce it some way, but for this project, it's gonna take 6 months or whatever. We're just gonna have to do something for the residences and
How many
temporary.
apartments might we have? I have no idea anymore.
What's that?
How many apartments, the ones above inbuilts are no longer there? How many like in your?
There's quite a few.
Well, from Strawfers, I think, the old Strawfers all the way over to the bank is apartments, isn't it?
And the other way also.
Yeah, above
Yeah,
Stain.
Shelley's building has places.
Yeah, Shelley's got 2 or 3, that's right. And we've worked with them before, they've kind of figured it out. So I think they're on the west side there part of the time.
Okay. Clear enough?
I think, I guess what I'm hearing is, we need to come up with a plan for the apartments.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, okay.
Tags,
Yeah.
mirror tags or
Danny?
something.
Because risk is on this project, once we get a pre-con with TK, get a little better idea how they're gonna approach it, which pretty much, once they start, it's shut down, it's closed off. Then we'll try to quickly scramble and have a public meeting right here and invite anybody and everybody in the whole area, like we've always done. We did phase 1. And, they take their best shots at that point. Usually we'll have a handful of people staying after with special issues, just like we've just brought up. We may at that point, if there's only 6 to 8 of those, we may not want to globally advertise that either. We may want to, hey, if you're in an apartment, come see me or call me tomorrow. We've got some ideas for you.
Thank you.
Something like that, because we globally advertise, then it's not fair. We're not
Right.
treating people equal.
Good idea. Okay, last item is the
Okay.
purchasing policy changes.
Yeah, Mayor, down here, we have one pressing issue. It deals with the fire department. If you recall, we're in the process of trying to secure a fire truck for this next year. Corey, help me out here. The fire department would like to join a group purchasing group that specializes in fire trucks and be able to spec out fire trucks and get prices, and this is where the industry's going. Public Works has also ran into the same problem with large vehicles. City purchasing policy doesn't allow it, state code allows it. Well, Christine says that we have to amend our policy, and I believe it's right to do that. That's the real pressing issue. Corey has some other issues here. What I would first say, due to the lateness of this hour, in reviewing this, did anyone have any questions on what we're proposing? Or if you're okay, can we just take this for a vote on May 4th? And
Put it up for a vote, Mike.
Okay.
I think it's
Police
a
already
long
go
way.
through state bid, don't they?
Well, we could go through state bid, but you have to go through join these purchasing groups. We can't do that. So
For
state code
instance,
allows it.
state bid quit bidding big snowplow trucks. We've been buying them through a national, it's a similar group. We did a minor membership or whatever we did, but the last $260,000 trucks came through that. That was our only way, because state quit doing some of the bigger stuff. And they say, oh, next year maybe, oh, next year maybe. I don't think they'll ever restart.
The state didn't quit buying. They're running all kinds of.
Source was.
Okay, thank you.